So the first place that I ever heard the phrase optimal healthcare was from my brother, Dr. Jawara Hunter, Dr. Keith Jawara Hunter. He's very modest, but he really is one of the best trained physicians that I know, having trained in anesthesiology and in rehab medicine, and having done an internship in pediatrics. I met him as an intern at Harlem Hospital. He's always been involved with trying to serve African people, him and his entire family. When I met him, he and his wife used to go over to the library and teach people to read. People they didn't even know, they would go there and teach people to read. And he has many more credentials that people would think were more stellar and more important. But to me, that example I gave you of the selflessness of him and his family, and is really the highest thing I could say about him. I met him, in fact, putting up flyers on the bulletin board at Harlem Hospital. We were part of a thing called the Black Family. We were part of an organization called Black Family Collective, and we hosted a series of lectures at Harlem Hospital that included people like Dr. Ben, Dr. Clarke, Dr. Amos Wilson, Dr. Francis Wilson, Dr. Marimba Ani, and many, many others. Dr. Hunter was the chair or the president of that group, and he's just a basic all-around good brother as well as a great physician. So without any further delay, I'm going to ask Dr. Hunter to start off with us. Again, as I said, a few housekeeping things. We ask our speakers to speak no more than a half an hour. We have plenty of time. We've allowed plenty of time, and we're going to allow plenty of time for questions and answers. So without any further delay, Dr. Jawara Hunter, you're on.
Thank you, brother. It's always a pleasure to see you and be with you. I want to throw some praise at you for this diligent, hard work that you do, and don't really want a lot of credit for it, but I'm going to give you some credit for it, and we really appreciate it. I'd asked before if I could do the share screen thing. I'm hoping that's okay. And identify, our strengths and our challenges. So optimal health was a concept that came to me through an elder, Dr. John Chisel, who was a family practitioner in Baltimore. And he was like the first person to go to the National Medical Association and identify the need to have holistic and naturopathic types of conversations, because prior to that, there were none. He ended up being an advocate. He was very close to Dick Gregory and a lot of the people who were, changing diets and changing lifestyles. He made his transition about 10 years ago. So I always give him some praise. So Optimal Health for Black Families, ongoing challenge that we've been doing conferences since maybe 2006 down here. We've done about 5 conferences over the last few years and have had, really, really good turnouts. But for what I want to do today is kind of do what a friend of mine, James Granger, says, basically tell folks what you're going to tell them and then tell them again at the end. So the take home point is prevention works. As we can see, those countries that are engaged in prevention early and consistently have done best. I have a great respect for Cuba, a great respect for the African responses as well. What I think is most challenging right now is this is a new virus. It's an evolving issue, and there's conflict information that every day is coming out that's challenging what came out a few days before. I would encourage all of us to kind of, pay attention to what Cuba does, because they've seemed to have the most consistent public health response of any country that I know. And they've done so much for so many for so long that sometimes we really forget. When Katrina hit, actually Cuba was going to send some doctors to the United States, but of course they turned it down. So the Cubans identified this as a new entity that required a serious response. So they started to do contact tracing early. They did lockdowns, they wore masks, they did social distancing. And what happened was they had a very, very good response because they did what they knew they had to do. By the way, Cuba manufactures interferon, and they were sending some of that to China to help the Chinese response. And they even took the preparation very seriously into the school, so the children knew how to respond. The children were wearing masks, how to cough into their elbow creases and things like that. So I'm just impressed with them, and I'd encourage all of us to go on Granma, Granma is the official website of Cuba. You can always get it in English if you just click on the articles and they'll come up in English. Also been impressed with the response of many of our African countries. They've been clear about the importance of testing, and they've found inexpensive ways to test, especially Senegal, I think Madagascar, Ghana has been really attentive, and they've used good practices and good science. As we know, there are high risk groups in COVID. Most of the deaths are coming from elderly. When they were looking at Italy, for example, I think the 80-year-olds were just having the hardest time. Those identified in nursing homes. Of course, we are a high risk group. For no surprise there. The incarcerated are having one heck of a time, and those with multiple medical conditions, what we would call chronic illness, folks with diabetes, cardiovascular illnesses, and lung disease. Treatments for COVID have included monoclonal antibodies. This is a piece that is coming out of a company, Regeneron. Monoclonal antibodies are, I'm going to describe them a little bit in a second. And they basically, that and the product from Eli Lilly have gotten a little bit of attention in the recent past. If I could get this, I think it'll be here. No. Eli Lilly. Now, this was a little bit of a challenge here because nobody really likes this guy, but I think he was saying something that we may believe, we may not believe, but this medication from Eli Lilly was given to an elite group: Giuliani, Ben Carson, Trump's colleagues. And of course, he's saying he feels better after that. Now, of course, I'm not saying you can believe anything this guy says, but I'm just identifying that there's something out there. And Regeneron is another company that has monoclonal antibodies that's apparently being used to treat them. A little bit about monoclonal antibodies in just a second, okay? So again, high-risk patients. Our high-risk patients have been identified for this treatment for patients being over the age of 65, BMI bigger than 35. BMI is like a way to identify whether somebody is lean or large or actually obese. So patients with high risk include these patients here, diabetic and cardiovascular disease. And that's given for mild to moderate illness before hospitalization or before they require oxygen. The name of the cocktail is this long name. Anytime you see MAB, that's monoclonal antibodies. And please feel free to jot some questions down and send them to me if you can. So what is monoclonal antibody? It's a way that the pharmaceutical companies and researchers have identified ways to stimulate the immune system. And it's supposed to be very, very specific. So mono, of course, one, clonal, you make a large number, a clone of that one antibody, and it's supposed to attack the immune system selectively. The immune system, however, is very tricky. It is one of the most difficult things to study. When I was in med school, it gave me nightmares all the time because it's changing so much. So anyway, they are trying to go after the spike protein. That's the Pfizer and the Moderna product. Now, whether that's going to be enough is another question. Monoclonal antibody therapies are expensive, and there are huge research and development costs in bringing them to patients. They should run about annual price of this much money here, $100,000. Now, this is not going to be able to be handled by most of our people without extreme help from their insurance companies. And of course, when you lose your job in this country, you lose your insurance. James, keep me track on time, okay? Because I can't see my watch right now. All right, another treatment for COVID is a broad spectrum antiviral that they were trying for a while. However, the New England Journal of Medicine found that this antiviral is not effective. Steroid can be of some benefit if it's timed properly. All right, a couple of controversies. The Davos meeting you all know about, there was a world pandemic scenario discussed. And the reason I'm raising these things is to kind of get some of the controversial issues out there, because I think there's some digging in we can do with these things. The Wuhan games, whether the military games brought the COVID virus to Wuhan, the repo market crisis, which actually the financial and the oligarchs are saying caused the, that the pandemic caused the crisis in finance, but actually the crisis in finance happened a few months ahead of time. Media confusion is ongoing. The left lies as much as the right, so it's hard to figure out, but the notion that this was a hoax has still got a lot of traction. And the reason I put this down here is a concept that I think we should kind of grasp onto a little bit. Brother Wakesa out of Atlanta has a conference that he does, not a conference, a workshop called Healing Oppression's Wounds. One of his pieces has to do with dichotomous thinking versus diunital thinking. Dichotomous is either or, diunital is kind of like both and. And he's encouraging us to kind of use this kind of thinking so that we don't get caught up in like a right-left dynamic where if the right says something, you refute it all. If the left says something, you absorb it all, because that's not going to work for us. All right. Another controversy is Event 201 was a pandemic exercise to illustrate preparedness efforts, and this was funded by Bill and Melinda Gates. So I'm trying to get these things out the way so that we're not going to dodge them, but just say that they are there, and I'm still not sure how much to give them. This is a website that does a lot of financial critique, and they tell you a lot of information about what the high rollers are doing, and they are very clear that the COVID cases were coming way after economic demise. Carrie Mullis was the scientist who developed PCR. PCR is the polymerase chain reaction, which is the gold standard test right now for COVID. And Carrie Mullis, after he developed this, got the Nobel Prize for Science. He was very careful about being able to say when AIDS was abundantly problematic, that PCR could be used as a way to gauge who had HIV and who was sicker by having a higher number of, a higher amount of PCR reaction versus a lower amount. So he was very careful about that. And again, we've had at the outset, a good number of false positives, false negatives. There was a lot of questions about the reliability of the testing. All right, on to what we know a little bit about. Presentation of the patients with COVID. They diagnose generally with fever and cough, shortness of breath, and a low pulse oximetry reading. So for pulse oximetry, I'm gonna go back here to the screen here and show what a pulse oximeter looks like. This is a pulse oximeter. These guys here are used in the operating room, and they're also used in the ER, and now they use a lot of other places in offices as well. It's an easy way to get an idea of what your oxygen carrying capacity is in your blood. So you see like a number here, 98% is a very good number. 86 would be their pulse, and you can buy one of these at home and have it. Apparently they were hard to find. I think they're easier to find now, but that's what a pulse oximeter is. Patients walking into the emergency room with very low pulse oximetry readings is atypical. Why? Because patients who generally have lung disease and are having pulse oximetry readings in, let's say, the 80s, you see this is 90, that's a problem. In the 80s, generally have to be on oxygen. You'll see folks carrying little oxygen tanks with them or on their shoulder or with like a little roller. But patients with COVID were walking into the ER with low pulse oximetry and still not like really gasping for air. They would get sick over time though. Also, we noticed that these folks, when they were identified by CT scan, had microemboli, which are small blood clots, which again is not typical for a viral pneumonia. So again, one of my colleagues suggested this might be a way to help, that we could get pulse oximeters, which are relatively cheap, 15, 20 bucks, have it in the house. If it starts to go down, let's say from 98 down to 92, it might be a time to get onto the ER or get on to call your doctor. Just a suggestion. So what I did, I canvassed several colleagues and just got some of their feelings about stuff to get an idea of how they might respond, how they have responded. One of my colleagues actually took care of my mom and my brother, an experienced internal medicine professional, actually had COVID. Months after discharge, he's still experiencing fatigue. He told me he has specific concerns about Pfizer's past history. Well, when I moved this, I'm moving too much. I'm sorry about that. Pfizer's past history of recalls for a couple of meds, and that Moderna has never brought a vaccine to market. He claims he understands clearly vaccines are needed, but he's not planning to be first. This is an internal medicine doctor. Another colleague is a gynecologist, public health official in North Carolina. She initially warned me about not being able to rely on the CDC information because the data was being manipulated. She recommends the Hopkins dashboard. As a public health practitioner, she believes our people are high risk and need vaccination. We have housing disparities, environmental racism. She's very clear about that. It's a good sister from Brooklyn. She's very clear about how our people have to deal with these health problems. And when I dug down on her and I asked her if she had a reason why there has not been a longer, more robust treatment thrust, as much as the vaccine thrust, she was not sure why. She believes essential workers have more exposure, therefore they need coverage. We have higher death rates in our group. And her first priority as a healthcare practitioner, public health practitioner, would be for frontline COVID providers, healthcare providers taking care of COVID patients, and long-term care folks like nursing homes. Colleague 3 is a trauma surgeon and intensivist. He noted increase in violence and need for trauma surgery. There's a lot of stress going on, a lot of folks, finances is all messed up, and folks are stressed out. We're seeing long lines for food. He had a sense that many in the country weren't caring when New York City had a high rate. And he, again, can see both sides of the need for a vaccine. He believes there's not enough work on treatment. And also, he was concerned about a Florida statistician who was refuting the stats coming out of the Florida governor's office. And she got visited by the goon squad. This happened maybe 3 or 4 or 5 days ago. And he himself is personally going to take a wait and see approach. Another colleague, surgeon anthropologist, again, suggests protecting oneself and being careful. He's very concerned about downstream effects. He told me that he recalled that Ebola was still found in the sperm of survivors. So we don't know what downstream effects of COVID will be. We do know that folks can get reinfected. We've seen that. A recent case of post-vaccine anaphylaxis is also a cause for concern. What is anaphylaxis? It can be a severe or it can be relatively mild, but it can be potentially life-threatening. And it can occur relatively quickly. So those of you who are allergic might know that your doc asks you to carry EpiPens and get Benadryl shots sometime. I'm taking a break here to recognize a couple of folks. And I'm gonna do this real quick and recognize these two great people. So the main thesis of Marimba's work, Yoruba, is that, those who want to control us will go to great lengths. The same was established by Dr. Welsing. And a book that may not be as well known is this book by Ron Walters, White Nationalism, Black Interest. And he identifies the European obsession and tremendous fear of our potential. I'm sorry about that. Okay, moving on. Colleague number 5, a surgeon, an intensivist, and a researcher in septic shock. Shock is a very specific term. It's not like being shocked when you get, surprised by somebody. Shock is a situation where all the systems of your body are going haywire. And, if you don't correct it quickly, you will die. So that's his area of expertise. He himself was hospitalized for COVID after getting it in the ICU. He identified terrible diarrhea, dehydration, delirium, serious delirium, and total body depletion. He had kidney failure, and he had severe breathing problems. Now, I want y'all to pay attention to this. So I was talking about oxygenation and lungs. If we have somebody in the ER and they just need a little oxygen to get by, even if I have asthma attack, they might get 2 or 6 liters of oxygen, maybe 10. He had to get 60 liters a minute to prevent himself from being intubated, and intubation at that point was not a good thing. He believes a coordinated approach was not sought in this country, as for example, like I said, in Cuba. There's been a problem, he said, in the Euro-American culture, and he also identified a lot of Euro-Americans are dying as well. An emergency use authorization was something he wanted to point out to me is not the same as an FDA approval. He thinks there's a lot of manipulation with stock values as these guys move toward utilization, but emergency use authorization is exactly that. It's for emergency purposes only. We have to wonder about the concept of effective, and also the emergency use for the cocktail that Giuliani got and that they're saying other people got. And to follow up on that, there are people who apparently can get this cocktail, but it seemed like it's a lottery system. I'm not really clear about it. Each state is only getting a certain amount, and I'm not exactly sure. He thinks they may have manufacturing challenges and may not be able to be manufactured that quickly. He's concerned about the media, of course, and again, why the media has not asked why treatment protocols have not been standardized. He's decided not to take the vaccine now due to a statement of Dr. Fuller. I'm gonna see if I can bring Dr. Fuller up now. I'm hoping I can.
The FDA advisory committee that recommended the vaccine largely agreed it is safe and effective.
But one of the no votes came from a University of Michigan professor who was concerned about the vaccine's long-term impact. Paula Tutman has more.
21 experts from various scientific fields sat on that Pfizer vaccine advisory board yesterday. To the FDA, 17 voted yes, 4 voted no. University of Michigan virologist and viral pathogen researcher, Dr. Ovetta Fuller, voted no.
What does that mean for long-term effects that cannot even be looked at right now because we just got this into people?
But Dr. Fuller wants people to understand why she voted no.
Because the public needs to understand so they can do what they need to do.
It's not a lack of confidence in the research. It's that she believes some specific questions about risks through her goggles as a virologist did not get answered.
It would be better to have more data, broader data, to be certain that at least what we can look at, we've done our due diligence. I am also concerned, if I may just say, that with the vaccine, in boosting immune response to the S protein, which is the attachment protein of the virus, that we are now setting up a highly specific immune response for a virus that's going to be continually circulating.
The plain English version is, as a researcher and an expert in how viruses behave, she still had questions on the table in terms of autoimmunity and hyperimmunity. To break it down even further, she just wanted a bit more research before creating a full path to wide vaccinations to the masses.
I am a great advocate of vaccines. I think vaccines are a major way that we can stop or prevent infections, and that saying that a stitch in time saves 9. So I think it's incumbent upon us to do our due diligence and to release this gradually, as opposed to going from a complete clinical study to now an emergency use that offers it to millions of people.
She believes just 2 more months of controlled studies would answer some of those specific questions. She is aware that her voice carries weight and will, as an expert, to many who may not trust the science, the scientists, the process, or the vaccine. Her intent, however, is not to discourage, but to better investigate. I think that was your long way of saying you're not going to be first in line to take the vaccine right now.
I would like to be,
But
I want some answers before that.
it's really worth your while to go to clickondetroit.com, where we have put the entire conversation with Dr. Fuller, because what she's saying can really help you understand the process and make your own personal decision about the vaccine. Paula Tutman, Local 4.
The FDA advisory.
Okay, so I hope that came out well. I hope it was clear. And there was one thing, and I would encourage you to go to that Click Detroit website that they talked about, because she asks a question here: does it prevent asymptomatic spread? She was asking a question. So her initial interview was 45 minutes or so, and she was asking the question, does it prevent asymptomatic spread? And the FDA panelists did not get a chance to answer her question. I'm going to come to why that's important. Colleague 6 is an infectious disease specialist. She believes that masks are still a good idea. Again, prevention. She knows holidays are for family gatherings and folks are suffering from quarantine fatigue at this point. People are in groups where they don't need to be in groups. She's concerned about our men not wearing masks. Very concerned about logistics of vaccine transport. This vaccine medicine, the vaccine has to be super cold, and she's worried about Caribbean countries, African countries, poor countries that can't maintain that kind of cold. She's worried about alternative theories. She's worried about people talking about chips being put in the vaccine. She basically is telling folks to get the information and decide for themselves. Colleague 7, a musician, graphic artist. This is the only one of the group who's not a clinician, and he's a very dear friend. Asymptomatic spread from his son. That asymptomatic piece that Dr. Fuller was talking about, we're not sure where that is right now. Whether this vaccine will stop asymptomatic spread, Dr. Fuller thinks that with more research, you could figure that out. He had a history of multiple strokes and diabetes. He's still alive. He was near death but refused to go to the hospital. He exhibited delirium, exhaustion, depletion. His wife used vitamins, natural remedies, and he's still recovering. I want to say a little bit about reparations that I had done a talk years ago. It spoke to the population control as a goal of the West. We can't forget that. They are only 8, maybe 10% of the population, and they control a whole bunch of us in many ways. The talk also talked about the racism of technocracy, a late form of racism that basically just has a system of protocols in place that don't need anything but management. I'm encouraging support of ongoing reparations demands. There's one by the December 12th coalition going on right now. I encourage you all to support that. For myself, I'm not planning on getting the vaccine, but I'm going to wait and see. I'm encouraging the strengthening of African-centered networking in all realms of human interaction, and encouraging the asking of all questions that may taint the health and safety of our families. Some references: American Health Dilemma by Burden Clayton is a 2-volume set. It's encyclopedic, as is Medical Apartheid. Radio show that comes on in DC, WPFW, COVID, Race and Politics, on Mondays from 6 to 7. The Johns Hopkins dashboard is good. The CDC and FDA websites do have good information, but you should be careful. And I think that's it.
Dr. Hunter, I can't tell you how good that was. I mean, I have one question. You talked about people's suspicion of putting a chip in people. Is that possible? What do you mean by a chip?
I would think that it was something that would be on a nano level. I mean, extremely small piece of molecular actually technology that would be, something that they could track and control people with. When the theory started coming out, that was a big one that Gates really wanted to chip everybody, wanted to chip, 7 billion people so they could, have better management of the population. So that's where the chip came from. I'm not sure if there's any validity to it. I do know nanotechnology is a very robust field of study. And of course, the military gets everything first. So there may be something going on that we don't know about.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Hunter. I wonder if anybody has questions. You can put them in the chat for Dr. Hunter right now, but we'll have a longer question and answer period later when we'll be able to ask questions of everybody. But people might have questions right now. I see Malika Lumumba. Can you type in the chat your question? Okay, so let's look at the chat. I don't see anything. Anyone else? Okay.
Peace, brother McIntosh.
Yes, sir.
Brother Doc.
Yes, sir.
I can't. My battery's about to die on my phone. So can I ask my question real quick
Sure.
instead
Go
of
ahead,
putting it in
brother.
the chat?
Go ahead, brother.
I've read that some of these vaccines, I don't know which one it is. I know it's like 6 different varieties out there now, but one of them they're talking about changing your RNA. And once it changes your RNA, if there's any adverse effects to it, to your body, it's irreversible. I know they said some people had got Bell's palsy, but that was they recovered from that. But other people, they're waiting to see if it's going to have any more serious effects. Can one of y'all talk about that, whether or not it'll be irreversible, and are you looking forward to the vaccine, or is that something that we should wait and see once all of the facts are in?
I'm going to defer on a long answer. I think that what's going on now, though, is that the creation of the new vaccines are a new approach. And Dr. Gallman, Dr. Hooker, they are, fantastic clinicians, and they gotta, help me with this. But I know that vaccines in the past have usually been live attenuated viruses that they would make, into a kind of a little soup, and then take the product out of that, and then manufacture that. Live attenuated was like a whole virus, so you got a picture of the whole virus. These little monoclonal antibodies are different, and I'm not sure if the mRNA piece is a new way to create a vaccine, put it that way. That's really the extent of what I know about it. So the wait and see piece is a valid response, but you might get better answers from Dr. Gallman, Dr. Hooker, other practitioners.
All right, Dr. Hunter, we have hold on. Do not unmute yourself. Anyone, stay muted. Dr. Hooker, pardon me, Dr. Hunter. There's a question from Malika Lumumba, who wanted to know what was Hopkins dashboard,
right,
and what is the Cuban reference to gamma?
Okay.
Is it .com, .org, or what?
So the first one is grandma.com. Grandma. I'll put www. And it's the official newspaper of the Cuban people. Grandma. Grandma was the name of the boat that they took, that Fidel took and his people took from Mexico when they landed in Santiago to continue the revolution. So that's grandma. The Hopkins dashboard is just type in Hopkins dashboard basically, and it is basically the Hopkins COVID response data center. So there's a lot of stats, a lot of information. It kind of mirrors the CDC stuff, but the people who I've spoken to said the dashboard at Hopkins is actually in some ways better than the CDC. So it's called a dashboard. And just to back up a little bit, that Florida statistician female who got vamped on by the goon squad had established her own dashboard in Florida, and the government officials in Florida didn't appreciate that because she was having some information that contradicted what was on the Florida governor's website dashboard. Does that answer the question?
All right, Dr. Hunter, there is another question from someone, but they're not putting it in the chat. I'm telling everyone, please put your question in the chat because we can't have any other speakers other than the speakers we have. It looks like a lot of time, but it's not as much time as it looks, especially since we're allowing for ample question and answers. Okay, I told you a little bit about our next speaker. We're going to call on Dr. Gallman, who is a gastroenterologist from Columbia, but he's also active on the boards of several organizations, including ASCAC. And I first met him, I think, at the Institute for the Black World Conference. And one of the interesting things is that he knows Dr. Hooker's dad, Dr. Atu Hooker. He knew him when he was alive. So I'm going to ask Dr. Dr. Gallman to tell us a little bit more about himself and to actually begin now. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me, do I have to unmute you? Okay.
Okay. Hotep all.
Hotep, brother.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm very honored to be here. And did not prepare a PowerPoint, but what I wanted to do is to make a few observations. I think that one of the things that I noticed here in South Carolina early on was the fact that there was so many rumors and so much bad information going around that people actually were becoming paranoid in terms of this whole thing. We've all heard that saying, when white America gets a cold, Black America gets pneumonia. And indeed, that appears to be what has been happening with COVID. Brother Jawara referenced the work by Harriet Washington, and also the book, the 2-volume book, American Health Dilemma, which I recommend extremely highly. It was published in the early 2000s, but it's still good. And I think that in terms of reference, that's excellent. One of the paranoid things that that I had to confront was this whole idea that the COVID was a method of genocide. Now, if we look at the definition of genocide, it becomes obvious that genocide has been committed against us in America. However, you know, the whole idea that this was created just to eliminate us, I think, is taking it a little bit farther than it needs to go. For anyone who may be interested, I would recommend that you go to the definition of genocide as defined by the United Nations in 1948. Now, there's a relatively new concept called necropolitics. And necropolitics is the use of social and political power to dictate how people live and how people die. Unfortunately, this whole idea of herd immunity is an aspect of necropolitics. And if we remember, there were some countries, I think Sweden was one, in which they decided to handle this whole thing with regard to herd immunity, which really meant that they were willing to sacrifice those people who were most vulnerable in order to save the society, instead of putting any effort into treatment and prevention. That did not turn out well. And so what's happening now is that they are they're suffering from it. But I want to go through some of the myths that we had to deal with early on. Now, many of you may remember that at the very, very beginning, there was a rumor going around that melanin protected Black folk from COVID. And as has been shown over the last several months, that is indeed not true. Drinking hot lemon juice or bleach does not help. As a matter of fact, there are some people who say that taking mega doses of vitamin C could help. And that has really not been found to be true. Vitamin C is water soluble. So to a large extent, when we take these large doses, we end up urinating most of the vitamin C out. However, vitamin D may have some role in strengthening our immune system. So it's very important that we make sure that our vitamin D levels are adequate. And as you know, as many of you might know, vitamin D plays a significant part in calcium metabolism. For a good evaluation of the role of vitamin D, ultraviolet light from the sun, I would recommend a book, Echoes of the Old Darkland by Dr. Charles Finch. And he has a chapter in which he deals with that quite well. We heard that COVID could not be spread in hot climates, and that's why, as Dr. Jawara mentioned, countries in Africa are doing so much better. That's not true, because if you look at it, Brazil is a tropical country, and Brazil is catching hell from the virus. We also know that many of the countries in Africa that have done extremely well in handling the virus are temperate countries, so that they do have a winter, and that's not a good excuse. Rinsing your nose with salt water doesn't help. Now, was one thing that actually was very interesting, and that was that some people said that if you took vaccines for other illnesses, that would help against COVID. And indeed, there were a couple of very, very interesting studies that showed, that seemed to suggest that the MMR vaccine was very effective in building up enough antibodies that it could possibly cross over and help to prevent COVID. I never saw any definitive work, but it seems to me that there were some places, some medical facilities that were asking their staff to take the MMR again. I think that it's important that we realize that antibiotics are designed for bacteria and do not work on viruses. One of the things that keeps coming up even now is the comparison of COVID with the flu. And I think that that's been reinforced by people in high positions and who have had access to a lot of media attention. The problem is that COVID is much more contagious than the flu, and it's also at least 10 times more deadly than the flu. So I think it's very important that we know that. We don't sniff steam. And I think that it's also important that we also realize that ozone therapy and silver compounds do not necessarily help in COVID. They have not, and actually there have been several studies that have shown that these compounds are not very effective. Ultraviolet light can be dangerous. You know, there are 3 types of ultraviolet lights, UVA, UVB, and UVC. And if any of you on social media, you know that there are a lot of advertisements that come through advertising these handheld instruments on ultraviolet light. I think that these handheld instruments, much like wearing gloves, tends to make us overconfident. You know, wearing gloves can be helpful, but when you touch something, it's just like you touching it with your hands. So if you're going to make gloves, if they're going to be effective, then you're going to be changing gloves very, very frequently. I really am looking forward more so to questions, but in terms of a final commentary, what I'm reminded of is this whole idea of comparison to typhoid Mary. In the early part of the 20th century, typhoid fever was rampant. And they found that there was this one woman who they called Typhoid Mary. Her name was Mary Malone. And she just absolutely refused to do any of the follow any of the recommendations by the public health officials. So they ended up actually virtually incarcerating her for years to keep her from spreading the disease. What came out afterwards is that they really did not educate her on what she had and how she could spread it. And as a matter of fact, before they incarcerated her, she would change her name and go work in other places where she came in contact with food, and she would infect people. And quite a few people died as a result of that. The parallel is there, however, with 24-hour news cycles and social media. Ignorance cannot be an excuse now. So why is it that we find so many people who equate being asked to wear a mask with the loss of freedom? Some people say that that's white privilege. And indeed, I think that that has a lot to do with it, except that I've heard people of African origin also say that's creating, taking away their rights. So in closing, there are 4 reasons that I think cause people to not want to cooperate: extreme selfishness, homicidal desires, mental illness, toxic stupidity are all 4. Extreme selfishness is pretty much self-explanatory. Homicidal desires, you know, that just with the concept of genocide, the fact early on that Black folk were being affected and dying more frequently, I wouldn't doubt that there were actually some people who said, well, let's just see if we can spread it. And they indulged in this whole idea of necropolitics. When considering psychological mechanisms, the first is denial, and this is something that I'm sure Dr. McIntosh could get into. Then the second consideration in psychological is mass hypnosis. And we actually saw that in Jonestown when over 900 people drank the Kool-Aid, the poison Kool-Aid. And actually, I suspect that what we are seeing is some form of mass hypnosis or mass hysteria going on in the political arena today. A third possibility is the Dunning-Kruger effect. And again, I think Dr. McIntosh could speak to this. This is a psychological entity in which people overestimate their intelligence. They think they're smarter than they are. And I'm sure many of us have had conversations with people who literally don't have a clue, but they are speaking with such authority. And actually, there was a term that some people came up for them. They call these folks COVIDious. And these COVIDious get into an arena called ultra-crepidarianism, in which people speak very, very authoritatively about something that they don't have any clue about. All these things I think, have to be considered. And finally, toxic stupidity. One of my favorite science fiction writers, aside from Walter Mosley, is Isaac Asimov. And I want to read a quote from him. Anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. So we've all witnessed this anti-intellectualism that's going on with the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I think that what we have to do is to make sure that we are informed, that we are knowledgeable. One of the things that that I have done over the course of the last several months, and I shared it with Brother Jawara, is to put together what I call the fact sheet. It's now 20 plus pages, dealing with a lot of information about COVID that I would be more than happy to share with anyone who may want it if you send me your email. It's a very basic document that talks about how it affects children, how COVID affects pregnant women, exactly what is coronavirus, and so forth and so on. So with that, I'll close and anxiously anticipate questions. Thank you. Hello.
Hi, I came on late. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for the information. As I said, I came on late. So did you say that you thought it would be good for us to take the virus and not take the virus? Take the vaccination and not take the vaccination?
I didn't say. Normally, it takes many years to develop a vaccine. And this vaccine was developed in less than a year, which suggests that there were a lot of corners cut. Now, we have been told that one of the reasons was that there were administrative corners cut, not medical and scientific corners cut. But
here I am.
I'm a little paranoid. So my approach is, I think I'm not going to be in that first wave of vaccination getters. I'm going to wait and see. And especially with the Pfizer vaccine, they've already noted several significant allergic reactions, to the extent that they are asking people not to take the virus if you have a lot of allergies. So that is of some concern. And the whole idea that that was highlighted in Dr. Hunter's presentation, Moderna has never, ever developed a vaccine. And even the Wall Street Journal was wary of Moderna because they appeared to come out of nowhere. So at least Pfizer has a track record.
All right, Dr. Neema Hooker is a graduate of the prestigious HCBU, Claflin University. She earned her degree in biochemistry. She went on to further her education at the Medical University of South Carolina, where she earned her medical degree. She completed a residency in family practice at Atrium Health in Charlotte, North Carolina, where she served as chief resident in her final year. Neema was a presidential scholar in the Alice Carson Tisdale Honors College, served as 2008 to 2009 Miss Pre-Alumni, and was one of the founding members of the Pulse Dance Company, to name a few of her accomplishments. She now resides in Charlotte, working as a board-certified family physician. She is a member of the American Academy of Family Physicians, the National Medical Association, and Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. In her free time, she enjoys traveling, hiking, and other outdoors activities, as well as staying active in dance and yoga. She serves as a mentor in the Young Black Leadership Alliance. At Claflin, Neema was a presidential scholar in the Alice Carson Tisdale. I think I'm repeating myself. And at any rate, Dr. Hooker, we're just so glad to have you here with us. And the fact that you're a mentor in the Young Black Leadership Alliance, I think you are fulfilling everything that your parents, the great Fanta Hooker and the great Atu Hooker, had in mind for you. And so the mic is all yours. And if you need a screen share, let me know.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. And thank you so much.
There I am.
Uh-oh.
Good.
I think we had somebody come on.
No, I'm asking people to be careful with that. So I think I muted you, Dr. Hooker. Just hold on 1 second.
I think I got it there.
Oh, you got it back. Okay. And I'm trying to see if anybody's unmuted. Stay muted, everyone. As I said before, I don't want to put anybody out the meeting, but I will in a heartbeat. Dr. Hooker, the floor is yours.
Alrighty.
And did you want a screen share?
No, I don't have any
Okay, cool. No problem. Good.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Uncle James, that's the African uncle, as he calls it. I like that term. For inviting me to speak this evening about trying to stay healthy during the time of the pandemic. I'm by no means a public speaker, so you guys have to bear with me as I try to impart some information. I've jotted down some notes here, so I'll be glancing back and forth at my phone over here just to make sure I don't miss what some things that I wanted to talk about. So
doing fine.
Dr. Gallman, who I haven't seen in years, nice to see you and hear your voice. And Uncle Keith, as Dr. Hunter, as he's introduced himself. I appreciate you guys who are going first, so I can kind of get a little bit of flavor of how I should be presenting here.
Can I interrupt you, Dr. Hooker?
Yeah.
No. Our presentations don't have to be the same. What I asked you to do, and I mean, you're free to do whatever you like, was to tell us a little bit about your experiences as a young physician, starting out, what you're seeing with your patients in this crisis of COVID, and any advice you have about staying healthy during COVID, pre-COVID, after COVID, and that sort of thing. So you're not limited to try to do the same presentation as anyone else.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right, so I did want to answer the young man's question about mRNA before I delve into it, because I didn't want to forget that. So mRNA is actually a small sequence of RNA, which is kind of similar to DNA. The cell takes in and then turns into a protein. So that DNA or mRNA sequence doesn't have to go inside the nucleus, or it doesn't go inside the nucleus to affect any part of our DNA. It's in the cell body itself, and it gets changed into a protein in the cell body, and it is destroyed after that protein is made. So of course, we all have to take science with the limitations that it has, but as it has been studied for for years, at this point, it doesn't have the capacity to enter the cell where DNA lies to have any long-term effects to our actual genetics. In order to get something to go inside the nucleus where the DNA is, you actually have to have like an electric shock or some kind of power to the nucleus in order to insert anything inside of the nucleus. And then also, they're wrapping the mRNA in a lipid, which essentially is a fat barrier, and that's how they even get it into the cell, because our body has protective factors on on how to accept foreign proteins and things like that. So the mRNA does go in the cell, but it doesn't go in the nucleus where the DNA is, and it is destroyed after the protein is made. So I think that was kind of the question that he had. I wanted to address that. So a little bit about myself. Uncle James did a pretty good job of introducing me, but I currently live in Charlotte, North Carolina, which we're having about a 70-degree day here, not to rub that in. I practice in primary care. I've been at the office that I'm at now for the past 2.5 years, which is a hospital-based practice. We have mixed demographics, but the majority of the patients that I see are African American. Average age is about 40 to 50 years old, and but I do see anywhere from newborns all the way up to have some patients in their 90s. So I do see a variety of patients. Most of them come in for the things that kind of plague our community: diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. That's probably a good bit of people that I see in the practice, in addition to doing well visits and physicals, interspersed in between there. And of course, acute visits if somebody has something come up that they need addressed, that's potentially, new for them, and kind of direct them on what specialist may be the best to go to after that. So I guess I would be remiss to say that mental health isn't a big aspect of what I do as well, because we know that when people's health is failing, a lot of the times it's because their mental health isn't in the best place and they're not where they can take care of themselves well enough. So I guess I want to talk a little bit about the mental health aspect of what COVID has done to the patients that I serve. So since the pandemic, of course, people have been unemployed. They have had to educate their children at home, and those who haven't lost their jobs are having to pick up the duties of their coworkers, who were laid off, and therefore, have this additional stress placed on their shoulders. So in addition to their usual duties, now they're playing teacher, parents, doing the duties of their other employees, and trying to take care of themselves in the midst of all of that. And I think even before COVID, talking to patients about health in general and things to do to remain healthy is already difficult. But some of the things I try to stress to them is getting adequate sleep. It's recommended that you get at least 6 hours of sleep a night, and 7 to 9 is optimal. I know a lot of people, because of technology, we're on our phones, we have television, and we're not prioritizing rest. And in order to heal effectively, that's something that has, to be given attention. So that's one of the things that I try to discuss with patients. We try to, get to the root of the problem and what could be going on where they're having insomnia and how to fix that. So that's one of the major things that I talk to them about in terms of their health. And of course, also, contributes to your mental health, because even if you have underlying anxiety, depression, if you're not getting sleep, those things are worse. And then also diet, and trying to eat the recommended 4 to 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day is a challenge for everyone. I think I read something one time that said I forget the statistics totally, but essentially we don't eat vegetables. And the 70% of the vegetables that we eat are potatoes, and most of them are French fries. So trying to get them to understand what vegetables are, and I just make it simple. If it's green, it's the vegetable, and trying to buy organic. And if you have, of course, the capacity to grow your own food, that would be optimal. So sleep, diet, and of course, exercise is another component of good health. And the recommendation is at least 150 minutes of aerobic exercise every week. So that's 30 minutes, 5 days a week, or however you want to break that down. And I tell people, that's a walk after dinner, or that's a walk during lunch, just for 30 minutes a day. And all of these things can help your health, like you're saying, pre-COVID and during COVID times. So those are kind of the basic things that I discuss with my patients on a regular basis on trying to maintain their health, throughout, pre-COVID and today. And a few supplements that I discuss with them, if that's something that they're interested in, is vitamin D, which we know plays a role in immune health. It's produced or used by the immune cells in order for them to function, as is omega-3s like fish oil and zinc. So those are the three big ones that I tell people to take, because it's likely we're deficient in all of these because of our diet and lifestyles anyway. I don't know if anybody wants to know specific dosing, zinc milligrams daily, vitamin D, 4,000, international units daily. And fish oil, you have to look for what's DHA and EPA components of fish oil, because that varies depending on the brand you buy, but at least 2,000 milligrams of that per day is the recommendation. Unless you're eating, 3 to 5 servings of fish per week, then you're going to get your omega-3s anyway, and that's the fatty fish. So those are the things that I discussed. And then I think Dr. Gallman mentioned vitamin C, which if you're eating healthy fruits and vegetables, you're going to get your vitamin C. There's no reason to supplement on top of that. But again, if your diet is poor, taking some vitamin C, 500 milligrams, 1,000 milligrams a day would be a good idea as well. And then the other component to good health is gut health. And probiotics, or you may have heard prebiotics, are a good supplement as well. So I think it's like 5 billion units of probiotic a day is the recommendation. Or if it's prefer not to take a capsule, you can eat like fermented foods. Kimchi is a big one, and I know kombucha is something I try to incorporate into my diet as well. The fermented black tea beverage. So those are some supplements that you can do on a daily basis to maintain your health in general and during COVID times. And I guess kind of circling back to the mental health, I'm by no means a psychiatrist or a trained mental health professional. I'm not going to pretend, but I think that trying to de-stress or do, I guess, calming activity is probably a good thing to do during these times as well. And I guess it's more difficult for those who are in isolation because they live alone, but trying to find ways to reach out to others safely, virtually, because as we know, mental health is a disorder of isolation. And as African people, we're very social people. So I think that has been a very detrimental impact on our psyche as well, not being able to come together, as we were before, especially for, different family functions that we're used to getting together for. So trying to find healthy ways to reach out to others, to breathe, de-stress. And I guess the other thing I've noticed too is a lot more people are trying to work full-time jobs and go to school full-time and raise children as single parents. And I think that that's sometimes unavoidable, but during all of that, during these times, just adds an additional layer of stress. And I think that I want to stop there and see if I have anything else to add. Um, I guess about the vaccine, I kind of talked a little bit about the mRNA, which is the new technology. I think that has people a little bit skeptical about the vaccine. But that technology has been studied for about 10 to 12 years now. So this isn't the first year that this has been looked at. The other information that's out there is funding. So since the funding for the vaccine has come from sources outside of Pfizer and all these other companies themselves, they've been able to push forward through the phases more easily without having the push, waiting on funding, essentially. So that was another reason for it to be sped along as it was. I think I saw a question in the chat for me.
You can see them. Yes, there was one about, do you recommend cod liver oil for vitamin D supplement?
So cod liver oil, I am not familiar off the top of my head how much vitamin D is in cod liver oil. I would say if you can look at the back of the supplement, and it should tell you how many IUs, which is international units, is in the cod liver oil supplement. And if it has 4,000, that's fine. Or you probably can take as much cod liver oil, which you may not want to do, as you need in order to get to that 4,000 international units. But if you have a primary care doctor or provider, they can even send the 4,000 international units into your pharmacy for you to have to take on a daily basis. So I guess my answer is I'm not quite sure about that.
Good. Excellent. And
so I want to know the dosages again of the supplements. So the zinc is 15 milligrams a day. The vitamin D is 4,000 to 5,000 international units a day. The what else did I say? The omega-3 is, you have to look for what's called the actual omega-3s, because if you're getting it in fish oil component, then it breaks it down into omega-3 components. So you want to look at the amount of omega-3, and it's specifically the EPA and the DHA component of it. And that should equal enough for you to get 2,000 milligrams of that a day. And that may be having to take 4 or 5 of the actual omega-3 supplement to get that amount. You have to look, because on the back of the bottle, it'll say serving size and how many capsules in each serving and all of that. So you kind of just have to do a little bit of math to figure out exactly how many capsules you need in order to get that amount. And then the vitamin C is 500 to 1,000 milligrams a day. Like I said, if you're not eating 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, if you're doing that, you don't need to supplement a vitamin C. And then the probiotic, you can get that over the counter in a capsule form. But I like kombucha, so I just drink that in order to get it in a way that gives you some other nutritional benefits as well. So I still someone asking about the hospitals with patients. So I work in an outpatient practice. I'm not in the hospitals. So in our clinic, we screen people who have any COVID-19 symptoms. So we're not seeing anyone in the office if they experience any cold-like symptoms. We schedule them for a virtual visit. We assess them through telemedicine, and then we send them for a test and figure out, if they need to be triaged to the hospital or to the emergency department, or where they need to go for the best care. Or sometimes I'll check in with them a couple of times a week, via virtual visits myself, if they seem to be stable. But specifically in the hospitals, I can't speak on.
Okay, Dr. Hooker, thank you so much. You're smart as a whip. I enjoyed it. You did exactly what we asked you to do. All right, Dr. DDB, Beatrice Chase Kinsey and the practitioners at Peace Health Center are committed to providing quality healing in the heart of Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, New York. Since 1989, Dr. Kinsey has provided HIV/AIDS treatment and alcohol substance detoxification using acupuncture at community-based organizations. In 1987, Dr. Kinsey earned her acupuncture diploma from the Harlem-based Institute of Traditional Chinese Medicine. In 1988, the International Institute of Acupuncture and Traditional Chinese Medicine certified her a Doctor of Acupuncture. In 1989, she earned certification from the National Commission for Certification of Acupuncturists in Oriental Medicine. That same year, she earned certification as Acupuncture D-Certification Specialist. In 1992, Mama B, as she's known in the community, was the first African-American licensed by New York State to practice acupuncture. This certification capped her decade-long quest for the knowledge and tools that would enable her to make a positive contribution to the healthcare available to her community. This quest was pursued while working full-time inside and outside her home. She is a widow, mother of 6, and grandmother of 8. Dr. Kinsey is the vice chair of the New York chapter of the National Association of Kawaida Organizations, better known as NACO, and the New York chair is Dr. Sagun Shabaka. The national chair is Dr. Maulana Karinga, chair of the organization US, creator of Kawaida, Kwanzaa, and Nguzu Saba. Among her numerous awards include 1993 Keeper of the Dream Award presented by Johnson Prep School in Brooklyn. My children attended there a while. 1994 Martin Luther King Jr. Award for Nia and Healing Hands presented by the Howard House's Tenant Council. 1998 Dr. Mutulu Shakur Health Activist Award presented by the family and friends of Dr. Mutulu Shakur. 1999 Keepers of the Flame Award presented by Kwanzaa Collective of Brooklyn. 2002 Founders Award presented by Malcolm X Day Parade and Celebration Committee. In 2011, Dr. Kinsey was acknowledged as one of New York's top doctors and given a feature story by the Network Journal. In 2013, Juneteenth Lifetime Achievement Award presented by Caltech School of African Dance and African Dance Company in recognition of the indelible mark you have made on our community through your lifetime commitment to healing, leadership, service, and maintaining cultural values of our people. In 2015, a certificate of appreciation from the Sankofa Community Empowerment Incorporated, the Umoja Award, is presented to Beatrice Shadidi Kinsey, Doctor of Acupuncture, licensed acupuncturist, New York State, for your unwavering commitment to the spirit of Umoja. In 2016, Black History Award from Kamal Black Student Association, Pacific College Oriental Medicine to Dr. Shadidi B. Chase Kinsey. May we never forget the struggle, nor the doors you left open, or the shoulders that we stand upon. In 2018, Omar Atala Egbe Incorporated presented to Dr. Shadidi B. Chase Kinsey, healer and community activist. We, the Obatala Egbe Incorporated, proudly present this award to you, honoring your dedicated service, bringing health and healing to our community, and your activism for the liberation of African peoples. In 2019, Harlem Fine Arts Show African Americans in Medicine Award for dedicated service and commitment to excellence. Support the Peace Health Center. You can donate to Peace Health Center in 2 ways. 1, Cash App to $ Peace Health Center. 2, mail check to Peace Health Center, 582 Halsey Street, Brooklyn, New York, 11233. All of that is also in the chat, so you can look at that and you can see how to do that. I'm going to ask Dr. Kinsey to now give a brief presentation, and then we're going to do some more things, and I have a presentation to do regarding mental health. Dr. Shadidi B. Kinsey is a treasure to the African community, and she is courageous, and she is diligent, and she is so empathic. I'm so happy to have her here, and I hope you will welcome her. I give her a nice, good African welcome, and let's hear what she has to say about the Peace Healthcare Center and anything else she wants to talk about. Dr. Shadidi B. Kenzie. You have to unmute yourself, Dr. Shadidi, if you...
Am I unmuted? Can
Yes,
you hear
you're
me?
unmuted now. You're unmuted now.
Sate. Habari gani, y'all?
You too.
And Jema
Njema Asante. Habari.
and Jema Asante. Asante Sana Simotap, Sister Betty Dobson, and Dr. James McIntosh, and the members of Simotap for today's health forum and on how our people can have the best health during COVID-19. And for this fundraiser for Peace Health Center. From the bottom of my heart and the depth of my soul, I thank you so much. Simultap is the epitome of our principle of Ujima for collective work and responsibility. And it just continues with its African excellence. On behalf of myself, Shadidi, Mama, Dr. B. Kinsey, I say, Karibu, welcome. You have found your family in a peaceful place, wishing you blessings without number and all good things without end. And we bear witness as an African people, as our beginning was great and good, so shall our development be throughout eternity. If we speak truth, do justice, and walk in the way of rightness. Hotep, Ashe, Hedi. For my people, Black people of African ancestry, who have struggled, resisted, survived, maintained, and developed in spite of white supremacy, racism, system of a medical apartheid. From the Holocaust of enslavement to present day here in the wilderness of North America. Peace Health Center celebrates 30 years of struggle, service, and healing. Since 1990, as a Kawita advocate and health activist, hearing the call, answering the call to build institutional builder, we co-founded Peace Health Center with the late Dafina Bate. She was a doctor of acupuncture and a licensed acupuncturist, and Sheila George, a medical doctor, licensed acupuncturist. Institutional building, the calling from the Egungun, the ancestors, our maternal grandmother, Beatrice Leary Armfield, Mama, the mother of 11 children, healed disharmonies through herbs, poultices, pot liquor. Mama taught us the value of nutrition. And by saying to keep the children out of the doctor's office, feed them well. Give them these balanced meals. Cook, people. Again, answering the charge of my spiritual guide, Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. We must discover the dawn and share it with the masses and bring the benefits of science and knowledge to those who need it most. Here at Peace Health Center, we put the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles, into practice. And those 7 principles are Umoja, unity, Kujichagulia, self-determination, Ujima, collective work and responsibility, Ujamaa, cooperative economics, Nia, purpose, Kuumba, creativity, Imani, faith. Umoja, unity, practitioners in unity of the healing arts, utilizing complementary medicine, not alternative medicine, complementary medicine. We have to make that distinction, because at peace with complementary medicine is not meant to take the place of medical care or from any other modalities. We're administering complementary. In fact, we even recommend to our patients to make their doctors aware and to keep their doctors informed, their medical doctors informed on their condition. When we say holistic medicine, we include all of the above. Complementary medicine, the medical, all of that is holistic because our communities need it and then some. We need all of the above. With the myself and with the acupuncture. Acupuncture is an ancient scientific art of healing. It works on the premise of balancing the body's energy, which is called chi. The cause of any disharmony within our body is the result of an imbalance of the body's chi. Through adjustment of the energy, the quality of energy can be improved and made to flow smoother, and therefore bringing healing. We have naturopathic practice with Dr. Ali Talib Abdullah. He uses nutritional counseling, herbal counseling, iridology, looking into the iris of the eye, and making an evaluation and making recommendations for supplements and herbs, reflexology. He's also an acupuncture detoxification specialist using auricular acupuncture, which has a very good effect on stress reduction. We have a massage therapist extraordinaire, again, using that energy, moving the energy, Pamela Gill. Beverly Hutchison is a licensed acupuncturist, and she's also a Reiki master. Rashida Ali is an acupuncture detoxification specialist, and also my assistant in acupuncture, where we use cupping and heat therapy, which is the moxibustion, again, to bring about harmony within and balance in the body system. And Barbara Goodwin, which today is her birthday, is our office manager. Barbara is a treasure, 85 years strong. And she runs things around here very efficiently. Our second principle of Kujichagulia, self-determination. We continue in the healing of BANA, the Black Acupuncturist Advisory Association of North America, under the leadership of Dr. Mutulu Shakur, our prisoner of war, to our medically underserved community here in the heart of Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. And it's been an uphill struggle since 1981, since I began my studies in acupuncture. And in beginning the studies, I mean, acupuncture was not that well known within our community. It wasn't utilized when I began the studies, but now it's a household word. And that came through, always give credit to Dr. Shakur for from the South Bronx to the world. This doctor of acupuncture brought this healing art to our community and founded the first school that I attended, and that was the Harlem Institute of Acupuncture. Here at Peace, positive education, which stands for our name, positive education, always corrects errors. Education, we bring the health seminars, workshops, open house with speakers and live music, live jazz and DJ and dance. We have rentals to the community organizations and our annual Kwanzaa community celebration. This coming Kwanzaa, will be our family, the Mason Kinsey family's 45th celebration of Kwanzaa, but it's Kwanzaa's 54th year of our holiday. So Kujichagulia, that self-determination, we keep that. Ujima, collective work and responsibility, to bring health to our people who have suffered the injustices of this healthcare system pre-COVID-19 through present day. In the Congressional Black Caucus, and this was Research Foundation in 2003 report of the 15 leading causes of death in the United States of America. At that time, African Americans led in 11 categories. What was the government's response? Close hospitals, the closings of hospitals. And this has led with this pandemic, now with the COVID-19 pandemic, to how our people are 3 times as likely of deaths with COVID-19. Black and Native American and Latinos, 3 times the death rate than whites. If they had died of COVID-19, the same rate as whites, Americans, about 21,200 Blacks, 10,000 Latinos, 1,000 Indigenous would still be alive. And this comes from the, I'll read it. This comes from the APM Research Lab staff, excuse me. And it was published in Our Time Press to November 19th through the 25th, 2020. So we advise our people with this pandemic to follow protocol, wear the mask, the personal distancing, avoid the crowds, to wash or sanitize hands, and to get tested. As Dr. McIntosh pointed out, and I was tested 5 weeks straight because I was visiting both my house and my mother-in-law, and they were in they're in nursing homes, and so that was required to have a negative COVID test before visiting, 7 days before visiting. And for 5 weeks straight, I was tested and negative. And then the 6th week, it came up positive. So the testing is very, very important. We have to be tested and traced, and if positive, to to isolate. And as Dr. Hooper was pointing out, to the rest, because that's one of the effects that that I felt was the fatigue. So the rest is very, very important. And with our schedules and all, we know we don't get the rest that is needed. So yes, but to follow the protocols, and with the vitamins, I agree with the vitamin D3 is very important, because 80% of Americans are vitamin D deficient. So the vitamin D, the vitamin C is very important. The zinc, the cod liver oil, and you get the A and D. Following the late Dr. Ronald Davison's protocol was the A, B, C, and D vitamins daily. But with the with the cod liver oil, you get the oil, and then you get the A and the D. And to rest, and to eat the balanced meals, and to stay in touch. The relationships are very important, because what we're going through, we have never experienced in our lifetimes. you know, the distancing and not being around our people. We've lost loved ones and not having proper homegoing services and embracing one another, because we just love to hug and be together. We're communal people. We're African people, and so this puts a big strain on us. So yes, and definitely enhance the immune system, because that's your first line of defense. You know, so the supplements and the exercise, very, very important. I recommend the Qigong, because that has a lot to do with the breath. So you can just go on YouTube, look up with Qigong and follow that, you know, 15, 30 minutes a day, and it's very, very helpful. And plus, it reduces the stress also. Okay. Um, and that's on Ujima. Ujima, Cooperative Economics, the Peace Health Center. We don't receive any government funds. We've maintained with the support of our people and our organizations, such as Imhotep, such as Our Time Press, such as NACO, and the support of our people. Yes, we do come together and we support one another, and we've been here for 30 years, so the proof is in the pudding, because we have truly affordable prices, fees. We even have a sliding scale, because we're all not in the same economics. So, and Nia, our purpose, our collective vocation, the building and development of our community in order to restore our people to their traditional greatness. Answering the call as healers to bring balance and health, to rid the disharmonies of improper diet, the effects of exposure to toxins, because we live in toxic zones. From Cancer Alley in New Orleans to the asthma trail here in New York City, and the effects of that, the asthma, the respiratory ailments, the circulatory ailments. They're even saying from the pollution, Alzheimer's. I've read studies where that has a lot to do with this. So at peace, balancing these disharmonies. And the emotional stress that we're in, some will call it stress, and others will call it depression. But it takes this toll. In Chinese medicine, where the fear and the anxiety attack the kidneys, it attacks the kidney energy. The anger and the depression injure the liver, and that worry and isolation, what it does to our stomach. We all know, it can cause ulcers, it can cause so many disharmonies. And the grief attacks the lungs. So these immune deficiencies, respiratory ailments, allergies, and other, we address the substance abuse and alcohol substance abuse. And with this COVID 19 and the syndrome that the after effects with the fatigue and the depression and the anxiety and the muscle aches, okay, we can balance that out also. And Kuumba, creativity. From ancient Kemet, the principle of Suruj Ta. Yes, as an injured physician, healing myself and our people, repairing that which is damaged, to restore that which is in despair, replenish the depleted, strengthen the weak, giving a ladder to those stuck in the pit of despair. Many times, even with a treatment, just listening to people, taking that time to just hear them, because of the tremendous weights that we carry. We wear the mask. We wear the mask. So Kuumba for our creativity here, and Imani, faith. That faith inspires us and sustains us. And coming together as patient practitioner, building these relationships, partners and balancing and of the healing process. Again, my spiritual guide, Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, taught the greatest faith is in the Creator, but the great also is in the faith in ourselves. I quote, "Without faith, nothing is possible. With it, nothing is impossible." We develop, that's how we develop, Gwendolyn Brooks. We develop in the whirlwind. We are mighty people. So don't you get weary, because I'm no ways tired. Kai Wheater's brought me so far from where I started from. Nobody told me that the road would be easy, but Obatala did not bring me this far to leave me. In conclusion, the Reverend Dr. Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Spirit advises we to keep the faith, baby. Faith in our Creator, faith in ourselves, Black people, faith in our fathers, our mothers, our grandfathers, our grandmothers, faith in our brothers, our sisters, faith in our future, our children, faith in all that makes us beautiful and strong, and faith that through hard work, long study, and a whole lot of love and understanding, we will again step back on the stage of human history as a free, proud, and productive people. Harambe! Santi Sana.
Santi Sana. Thank you so much. I forgot to mention that Dr. Shadidi was a psychiatrist also. I mean, not licensed or anything, not in psychiatry, but I call her and she always patches me up when I call her. And I've talked to many of the people who go there for the acupuncture. I think Sister Betty could attest to this, and they all speak about the counseling and loving care that they get from Dr. Shadidi when they come there for the acupuncture. The chair of neurology at the school I graduated from, he visited China, and he came back with film of us to show us of people doing brain surgery using acupuncture. Dr. Mutulu Shakur was a pioneer in this here in New York, and one of the tragedies is that they've been keeping him past his mandatory parole date. I think he's 4 years past the date that they were mandatorily supposed to parole him. And they're getting us used to these long sentences, like the one they gave to let's see, what was it? Muntakim, Jalil Muntakim. I think they kept him for basically for 50 years. And now our people aren't impressed with somebody that's been in prison for 20 years for fighting for our people. These are people who struggled on behalf of African people. Everybody knows H. Rap Brown, Jamil Abdul Alameen. It's just tragic what's happening with those prisons. And anyway, Dr. Shadidi is a member of one of the support groups she's a member of the family and friends of Dr. Mutulu Shakur, and Dr. Shakur actually taught her a little bit of the acupuncture. And Shakur was healing drug addicts up there in the Bronx with acupuncture. Even before he had the needles, he started massaging the people's ears and getting results. So, brothers and sisters, I can't say it enough. I hope I didn't scare you when I started talking about $100 and $1,000. The fourth principle I think that I heard her say, and she can help me, I think that was Ujamaa. Was that right? Ujamaa means cooperative economics. That means that we could double what we had now if everybody was to, well, we could triple it. If everybody was to send $20, it would triple what we have now. If everybody was to send $10, it would double what we have now. So what I'm saying is, don't let me scare you with the big numbers I was saying. You have two ways you can contribute. No amount is too small. Support the Peace Healthcare Center. We must preserve our institutions in the African community. You can donate by Cash App at $Peace Health Center, or you can mail a check to Peace Health Center, 582 Halsey Street, Brooklyn, New York, 11233. Now, we still have two more speakers to hear from. One of them, the next one, is going to be me. There were lots of statements in the chat, Sister Shadidi. People called you their loving queen, their humble queen. People talk about how many were helped by the detox methods that Dr. Matulu brought to everybody. That was Jawara. In fact, that was one of our speakers talked about that. So thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you so much for your presence in our community. And I want everybody, even if you gave before, think about what you can do to preserve this institution. Right now, I'm going to give a little presentation. Neema, you are spared because I wasn't able to send that video that I had. But what I'm going to do now is share screen. Let's see, I'm going to share the screen. And then I'm going to do this PowerPoint right here. And first thing we see there is Support Peace Health Center. No, that's not my first slide, but I'm going to just do right here. We're going to go slideshow from the beginning. All right, so from the very beginning, I told you who Keith Jawara Hunter was, but actually didn't go to the very beginning. I don't think I had a slide before that. Okay, I told you the first place I ever heard this phrase, optimal Black healthcare, was with my brother, Dr. Keith Jawara Hunter. And optimal means like the best. You know, it's not enough to talk about you want normal, or you want good, or you want equal. He talked about optimal healthcare. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, Bob.
Wave your hands if you can see it. Can you see the screen? Uh-oh. I see a brother. Brother Ray, you can't see the screen? See it? Okay, good. All right, so this was this flyer went through many, many changes. I was talking to Dr. Gallman. I actually forgot that he was a physician. You know, I knew it on the one hand, but it was a dissociation. When he said he was going to join, he was going to attend, I was happy he was going to attend. I didn't even think about the fact that I should invite him to come and speak. So with only a day's notice, he came and gave that beautiful presentation that we gave. I thank him for not embarrassing me by telling people that he only had a day's notice. With only a day's notice, he came in and did that beautiful presentation. Dr. Shadidi B. Kinsey, you just heard from her. You're going to hear from Dr. Lewis. He already had notified me that he was not going to be here until 6. So I'm going to give a little presentation here on the topic, optimal healthcare in the context of COVID. I told you that our healthcare is not simply the health that we have on an individual level, it's also the health that we have on a community level. We can't lose our community institutions. Support the Peace Health Center. Gave you 2 ways you can donate: Cash App, Peace Health, $ Peace Health Center, or mail a check to Peace Health Center. I want you to put your email address in the chat, and I want you to put how much you're going to give and how you're going to give it to the Peace Health Center. That's Dr. Atu Hooker. Some people that don't remember his name, I know you might remember him from Harlem Hospital. He was president of the Harlem House Staff, which was a local union there. And he also was involved with the National Reclamation Project, where they would go in and take over brownstones in Harlem. And he was also, one of the few doctors that was arrested many times here in New York for his struggles. He went down to South Carolina, founded an Afrocentric school, and I think the greatest testament, Afrocentric and African-centered school. I think the greatest testament to his success were 3 of his graduates who as I said before, got full rides to law school, medical school, and also graduated with honors from Clapton. So that was our two hooker. This is a family affair. That's Dr. Hunter, not to be confused with Dr. Hooker. That's Dr. Hunter at Neema's graduation. Dr. Neema Hunter, Hooker, who we heard from today. Dr. Neema Hooker, who we heard from today. That's her. That's her mom, Sister Fanta, and that's Keith's daughter, Anoa, my goddaughter. Okay, so today, Dr. Shadidi mentioned, she said some call it stress, some call it oppression. The St. Mary's Hospital recently conducted a study on human behavior that found that people who rated their stress levels as high or extremely high see the world differently than people who have little or no stress. So I'm going to give you that test, and this is how it goes. The photo you're about to see has two identical dolphins in it. The St. Mary's study revealed that in spite of the fact that the dolphins are identical, a person under stress will believe they see several differences. So I'm going to have you look at the photo for 10 to 15 seconds. If you think you spot more than one or two differences, you are stressed and may want to talk to your doctor. I hope those pictures looked identical to you. If you see any kind of differences, that means that you're suffering from stress. Now, before I can talk about stress, if you don't understand, this is whiter, but it should be white. If you don't understand white supremacy, racism, everything else you learn will only serve to confuse you. That was said by Neely Fuller and was propagated by Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. In Western psychiatry, they talk about conflict. The unconscious material that Freud talked about mainly involves sex. When they talk about, if you have a Western psychiatrist now and you tell him about slavery, he says, oh, that was a long time ago. It's not important now. If you talk to him about the pharmaceutical economics, because understand, somebody's going to make a lot of money off of this COVID. The rest of us may be doing bad, but there's some people who are going to do very well. They're going to do very well on the stock market, and they're going to do very well with their specific firms making money. If you talk to the average psychiatrist, he thinks medication helps anything. If you talk to him about prevention, he says, well, that's okay, so long as it doesn't upset the status quo. And if you talk to him about racism, they will guarantee you that that's not really one of the big important factors when it comes to mental health. It's more right here, you can look and see this patient right here. This is more than a simple case of dysmorphic, oh, there's an R missing, dysmorphic obsessions followed by surgical compulsion. That's what a Western trained psychiatrist might tell you. But if you could never competently treat this brother if it wasn't too late without an understanding of white supremacy. Stress is defined as an organism's total response to the environmental demands or pressures. And we already established that all of you were stressed because you also, those two dolphins didn't look alike to you. Stress is the body's reaction to a change that requires a physical, mental, or emotional adjustment or response. Would you say COVID meets that definition? I would say so. Stress can affect every system of the body. The integument, that means your skin, that means your head. Musculoskeletal, that means your, you know what that is, your bones and your muscles. And your ligaments and your tendons. Your cardiac, that's your heart. Respiratory, that's your lungs. Endocrine, that's your glands. Genitourinary, digestive, and your central nervous system. That is your brain and your spinal cord. Now I could go through each one. You already know this, but I'm just going to remind you. You ever see anybody lose their hair because they are very, very stressed? Did you ever see anybody who got rashes suddenly because they were stressed? Musculoskeletal. If you get stressed and you tense your frontal muscles, your frontalis muscle on your head, that will cause you to have a frontal headache. If you tense the occipital muscle that's in the back, that'll cause you to get a headache in the back. If you tense those muscles on the side of your head, the temporalis muscles, that'll cause you to get a temporal headache. Cardiac. People go to the hospital all the time thinking they're suffering from a heart attack, and then they examine the person and find out that it's just anxiety and stress. I could go through every system. Respiratory is notable because it has a syndrome where a person feels that they're suffering from oxygen hunger. They feel that they don't have enough air and they're breathing very, very rapidly. And it turns out that what they have is they've made their body go hyperkalemic, which means that it's more basic than it should be. Instead of, it's not acidic, but it should be, but it becomes more basic. And that causes them to have all kinds of symptoms, spasms of different sorts. It can even make a person lose their consciousness. If you see a person who's having that hyperventilation syndrome that's caused by stress, the treatment for it is to have them rebreathe into a paper bag. Don't do that with somebody with COVID, but if it's a truly hyperventilated syndrome, they will get better. Endocrine, that's all the glands in your body. They're all connected. You see people get stressed out. Those glands, they secrete small amounts of material that have big effects all over the body. Genitourinary. You ever heard anybody say, I was so scared I what? On myself. I peed on myself, right? You have people on the other hand, the nurse says, fill this cup up. And they're so nervous they can't fill the cup up. I said genitourinary. So I'm not just talking about the urinary. We have women who, because of anxiety, they feel pain when they have sex, dyspareunia. We have men who cannot get an erection or who premature ejaculate. All of these things can be caused by stress. The digestive system. You have people who have they're constipated because of stress. You have people who have diarrhea because of stress. You have people who have perhaps even develop ulcers because of stress. We know it plays a role. Yourself. Okay. So the central nervous and spinal cord. I'm going to skip. My point was every system of the body it can affect. Right here, you can file this under who cares. They said that this man, George Floyd, was positive for coronavirus. What's my point? We were dying, we were suffering, we were under stress before coronavirus ever got here. If he had a coronavirus, positive coronavirus, we know it played no role in his death. We all saw this man was murdered. That was George Floyd. Usually when we talk about mental disorders, we talk about any kind of mental discomfort that you have and a symptom. I'm talking about if you're depressed, if you're sad, if you're angry, if you're too angry, any of those things. Those are normal emotions, but when you have too much of them or when they're inappropriate, those things are the things that make people sick. The three noxious emotions are fear, sadness, and hostility. Each of them has a specific stressor. When somebody is afraid, there's only one thing makes people afraid. And that thing that makes them afraid is danger. We have lots of words for fear. Sometimes we say the person is anxious. Sometimes we say they're worried. But there's one thing that causes fear, anxiety, and worry, and that's danger. Okay, I may have to let the people in the waiting room stay because every time I put somebody in, they start talking. All right, loss is the stressor for sadness and depression. Anytime you see somebody depressed, it's because they lost. They could lose a friend, they could lose a job, they could lose a loved one, they could lose some money, they could lose face. But loss is the thing that triggers sadness and depression. Frustration, that's the other stressor. It's the stressor for anger. What's frustration? Frustration is when you want to do something, you want to have something. Some people call it a blocked wish. When you want to do something, be something, get somewhere, and something blocks you. It causes anger and hostility. What's the difference? Okay, let's go back to fear and anxiety and worry. I said with fear, if I'm standing over you with an axe, you're afraid. If I tell you I'm coming back to get you tomorrow with my axe, during that period of time, you probably will worry about it. If you have the feeling like I'm coming to get you with my axe and you don't know why, that's what we call anxiety. With respect to anger and hostility, I told you the stressor was frustration. What's the difference? Anger and hostility. Anger is a normal emotion. It's a good emotion. It's an emotion that you should feel. I'm sure Cinque felt anger when he overtook the people on that ship and freed his people. I'm sure that Madison Washington felt the same thing when he freed that ship and took it to the Caribbean. Anger is a normal emotion which helps you get past an obstacle. It helps you go over, around, or through anything that might be blocking you. Do you think that any things in our history and have made us frustrated and angry before COVID? You bet. But now what's the difference between hostility? Hostility is not a normal emotion. Hostility, I can illustrate it like this. You're driving down the street, you're trying to get to your job, your boss told you that if you're late one more time, you're going to be fired. So a car blocks you. The car moves to the cars just goes everywhere you go. You move to the left, the car moves to the left. You move to the right, the car moves to the right. You fake to the left, get around on the right. Anger is when you speed past that person and you head straight to your job. You get to your job 1 minute early and you keep your job. Hostility is when you forget about your goal. You forget about your job. You stop to jink around with the person on the highway. You swerve, you stop in front of them, you do all those things. You get to work 1 minute late and you lose your job. Anger is normal. It helps you. Hostility is abnormal. It hurts you. Does COVID contribute to any of these? Do you think that that COVID causes danger for some people? Do you think that it causes loss? Do you think it causes frustration? You bet. People are scared staying in their houses. They're afraid to talk to people. They're afraid not to wear their mask, rightfully so. You have people that are afraid about, well, should I get tested? Should I get a vaccination? Should I do the things that they're telling me in terms of social distancing? Should I kiss my wife? Should I not kiss my wife? Talk about loss. There's people that have lost their jobs. There's people that don't have money. There's people that have lost a loved one. On our CMOTAP executive committee, three of our members have had children that had COVID. 2 of them, their children died. So this is a illness with lots and lots of loss. But African people were suffering these losses long before COVID. Frustration. Do you think that a person that has a little small business, he opened up his business the day before they announced these restrictions in COVID and now has to go out of business? Do you think he feels frustrated and angry and maybe feels hostile? You bet. Stress works on the brain. In addition to all those other places I told you about. I told you about the skin. I told you about the genitals. I told you about the muscles. But one of the most important places that the stress works is in the brain. The neurons in the brain resemble small glands and secrete hormone-like substances called neurotransmitters. A hormone means that it's a small amount causes a big reaction. Some of the hormones or neurotransmitters in the brain, and there are many, many, include noradrenaline, norepinephrine, also called norepinephrine, I should say, acetylcholine, serotonin, dopamine, and GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid. These are just a few of the neurotransmitters. They're the ways that the nerves in your brain and the nerves throughout your body communicate with each other. Everybody's brain is different. You can see Obama on this side. You can see George Bush, W. Bush there with his book upside down. Everybody's brain is different. Hormones and neurochemicals also mediate the 3 emotions I just talked about. The 3 worst stresses, I told you, anger, frustration, loss, and danger. They cause fear, sadness, and anger. The glands play their role by secreting hormones, and means from the Greek to set in motion. That's what I just said. Small amounts, like adrenaline and cortisol, are 2 hormones important in stress. They come partially from the adrenal gland, which in some ways resembles a big nerve cell, at least a part of it. You get shut off by these hormones. You know what I mean? Like the cortical part of your brain. Joy DeGruy Leary, that's the name I was trying to remember a second ago. Dr. Joy DeGruy. brain shuts itself down in certain situations. Your cerebral cortex, the part that does all this logical thinking, all this sort of stuff, it's the most recent part of your brain to develop. In an emergency, your brain doesn't want to. Your survival is not going to hinge on that part of your brain. These hormones, the adrenaline and that sort of thing, when it's fight or flight, those things kick in. The cortisol, they kick in and they make you act even before you can think. These hormones can make you do the things that you have to do. In an extreme, in those situations where you talk about people having a stress disorder, either an acute stress disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, it causes nerves to be on edge. It means their concentration may be diminished. They may be hypervigilant, always on edge, always looking for something that might go wrong. Angry outbursts, sleeplessness, easily startled. That's one extreme of it. Some stress has been passed down to us, even before COVID. You think this little girl having to go to school with people calling her racial names and this sort of thing, having to be in a class by herself, that was stress? You bet that it was. You think this young man and his family experienced stress that was murdered over as he went to the store to get some Skittles? You think that our people on these slates, you bet, we have experienced stress long before COVID-19. So my point is that the things we need to do to stay mentally healthy involve most of the same things that we needed to do before. People like Wade Noble say we suffer from a shattered consciousness and a fractured identity. I'll get to that a little bit later. What is the source of our fear, sadness, and anger? You bet that this recent set of experiences that we've had, mainly over the last 400 years, 400 to 500 years, that they are the source of a lot of the feelings that we have. And that's what Joy DeGruy said. She says that this stuff is intergenerational, that is passed through the culture, not through the genes necessarily. Some people say we have genetic memory, but not through the genes necessarily, but culturally is passed down. Some of these adaptive behaviors from slavery now are maladaptive, that they get passed down through families to us. Some stress has been passed down to us, the lynchings. This is after slavery. These kinds of things. This was your soon-to-be not president when he was calling for the death of some innocent young men that he was blaming for something that occurred in Central Park. Unemployment. You think that has any kind of effect on stress and on your emotions and on your mental health? This is long before COVID. Our people were suffering from this. Results of a prospective study on the impact of stress on the health in 300 men assessed every 6 months was similar. They experienced more stress when they were unemployed. It's common sense. After unemployment, symptoms of somatization, that means thinking that something's wrong with your body, that you got different kinds of aches and pains and illnesses. Depression and anxiety are significantly greater in the unemployed than the employed. Unemployed men made significantly more visits to the emergency rooms and to the doctor than did people who were employed. Food insecurity. Do you think that that's having an effect on us? And that has an effect on us. The vast majority of mental health problems have some relationship to stress. The 3 worst stresses are danger, which leads to fear, anxiety, and worry. Frustration, which leads to anger and hostility, block loss, and loss, which leads to guilt and shame and sadness. Under stress, these are some of the body changes that the hormones and neurochemicals cause. They can cause all these kinds of things. If you wonder why we have so much diabetes, maybe stress has something to do with it, because we're secreting these hormones all the time. It helps to increase our blood sugar. It increases our heart rate, working the heart more. That might have something to do with it. All of these things that are supposed to be adaptive for a little bit of stress, when you have so much stress, the type of stress that African people live in, leads to shorter lifespans, leads to poor health. Some of the most important responses to stress occur in the brain, and it's in the brain where we have to take some of our interventions. We're traumatized people, and we are resilient people. Many people would be dead if they underwent the things that we underwent. Here, I'm using this schema from Dr. Not these pictures, but the great psychiatrist, Dr. Carl Bell. He says you have to turn learned helplessness into learned helpfulness. Choose the power from within. You look on this chart around the picture of me there in the middle, and you see people, you see the person who has 3 of the first 10 patents in chip technology up there. That's Dr. Dean. You see other Black scientists and doctors. These are people that show tremendous resilience in spite of the oppression, in spite of the Jim Crow, in spite of the slavery. So good health is not the absence of emotions, but involves the return to homeostasis or balance. Is what our ancestors call it. They call it ma'at. It means the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems working together, not in opposition, but in appositional unity. That means like right next to each other, unified. The opposite of stress or districtia or tearing asunder is unity. In other words, the origin of the word stress is districtia, and it means the tearing asunder. The opposite of that is unity. If we look at this statement right here by Marcus Garvey, he said,
Excuse me,
even
none of us can see your screen, so as you're talking, we're not seeing your screen. I hate to interrupt,
okay,
but I'll let you know.
okay, let me escape. I guess that's because, gosh, that's really disturbing to me. I'm so sorry. And that's because the person was successful, the person that keeps coming in and and speaking. Okay, I'm just going to flash through those pictures. When's the last picture that you saw? Did you see that stress can affect every system of the body? Let me, oh
That's
gosh.
the last one, where you had like the women's.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's what I thought. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to share this slide, share my screen again. I'm not going to go through all those things I said because you heard them. What I'm going to do is just show you the slides real quick. Let's see.
Sante Sana.
How do we share the screen? Here we go. Share the screen. Okay. Slide. All right. So you can see the young lady again. I went through those things. You didn't see George Floyd, but this was an article saying that he had, okay, these were the things. A lot of these were written slides, so it's not too bad. All right, that's the picture of Obama and my point was that everybody's brain is different. I mean, see, some people will be stressed and they will learn to play the harmonica on their own and become a musical prodigy like Stevie Wonder. Other people will end up with a syndrome in which they have their nerves on edge. I was showing you some of the things that cause our stress. You saw slave ship just now. Sources of our anger and fear. I showed you some of the lynchings. This was the ad that was taken out by Donald Trump to try to lynch some innocent boys. I told you about the effects of unemployment. Now I told you about food insecurity. Just mentioned it, that's it. And these were some of the effects that I was saying that stress causes on your body, increasing your blood sugar, increasing your heart rate. That, of course, may play a role. Just overworking your hormones and your nerves in that way may play a role in why we have so much shorter lives and lose so many years of life. Talked about Carl Bell. I showed you the pictures. These are great Black scientists all around, or had some relationship to science, which I would explain in my presentation on the contribution of Blacks in science and medicine and technology. Good health is not the absence of emotion, but involves the return to homeostasis or balance called by our ancestors Ma'at. This is Marcus Garvey. This is a statement he made. He said, if 400,000 Negroes can only get to know themselves, to know that in them is a sovereign power, is an authority that is absolute, then in the next 24 hours, we would have a new race, we would have a nation, an empire, irrespective of what the world thinks. If I ask the average person what's the first thing that he starts talking about there, they would probably say that he's talking about knowing yourself, because he says get to know themselves. But it's actually the first thing he's talking about in that statement is unity, because 400 million was his estimate of how many Africans we had in the world at that time. So he's talking about us in a unified way, getting to know ourselves and getting, and I told you the opposite of stress is unity. It's not eliminating your emotions. It's making your emotions work in appositional unity. Let's start with some answers before we start with problems. So we're talking about how can we be healthier? I said this goes for the individual level, this goes for the community level, this goes for the national and the international level. Please mute yourself. You just came in the room, mute yourself. The
Jean
answers.
Aniabona.
Okay.
Aniabona.
I don't know what you're
Jean
saying.
Aniabona.
Jean Aniabona, please mute yourself, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. The answers are unity, organization, nationhood, independence, self-knowledge, race first, race pride, buy black, self-educate, self-commerce, self-industry, self-government, self-defense. These are the things we have to do. On the international level with this COVID thing, after the things that white scientists have said, talking about experimenting, giving it first to to black people, that sort of thing, nobody, no nation should just accept that kind of a program without their own scientists reviewing it, testing out. If you have to test out every 5th dose, every 10th dose, or whatever it is, unless you can make it yourself. If you can make it yourself, that's the epitome of being independent. But other than that, you got to check. You can't just accept Greeks bearing gifts. America creates appetites. When we don't control our appetites control us. Obesity, this is killing us. We would have many more years of life if we just address that issue. There's 2 types of ways that you can be malnourished. One of the problems we have is not having enough food. Another way is not having the proper food. And another way is just eating the wrong foods. And this is responsible for many of the illnesses that we have. It's responsible for a lot of the diabetes. As you know, diabetes and COVID has proven to be a deadly mixture. This also is a reason for heart problems and heart disease, coronary artery disease. You know that coronary problems and COVID are a deadly mixture. So the same things that we needed to do to stay healthy before COVID are the things we need to do. I'm not going to play this video for you, but no, I have to show you. I remember I said on an international level, every level, I'll just let you hear a few seconds of this so you can see what the issue is. Oh, I gotta share. Let's see.
Kenyans are in an uproar over reports.
Can you hear this?
Restaurant, simply referred to as the Chinese restaurant, is refusing to admit any black Kenyans after 5 p.m. Lack of creativity aside, the management has come out saying that they do not allow black Kenyans into the restaurant.
I'm just going to skip that. If you can still hear me, wave your hand. Can you hear me? Okay, you're waving your hand. Okay, good. I had the speaker go through the computer for a second there, so I just didn't know if you were still hearing me. But internationally, those same things that we talked about, self-reliance, independence, the things that Dr. Shadidi went through in the 7 principles. Those are the solutions to our having good health on an individual level and on a large level. By the age of 18, when we talk about stress, the average American has seen 200,000 acts of violence on TV, including 40,000 murders. If anything, African children in America see more than that, because it's been shown that we watch more TV, we play more video games than anybody. Who said this? Did Dr. McIntosh say this? No. This is the American Academy of Pediatrics. They said that extensive research indicates that media violence can contribute to aggressive behavior, desensitization to violence, nightmares, and fear of being harmed. We get it through our music. I didn't take the top 8 modern, today's or current rap records because I got tired of doing it. Every time I did a speech on this particular issue, the results were always the same. There's no reason for me to go and do this research all over again when I hear the music. The top rap records promote the top things killing us. If you take the top 20 causes of death in the African community, you can relate them to behavioral issues. You talk about people getting murdered, what are you talking about? You're talking about disrespect. The guy didn't kill the person for a quarter or kill him for the sneakers. He killed him because he had the gun. The person said no, and he said, "You don't you think I'm not? You think I won't disrespect?" The person didn't get shot because he got shot because this man is not the sneakers. This man is disrespecting me. He's trying to take my shoes off of my feet. That's why people. So when you have music that promotes disrespect, you're promoting murder in the African community. Tobacco. When you have records constantly talking about their blunts and smoking blunts, that is marijuana inside of the tobacco. Can you think of anything worse for your lungs, especially during a COVID pandemic? When you talk about violence, people hitting each other, people fighting, again, that's short of murder, that comes from disrespect. But these are some of the reasons these are the top reasons that these are the top stressors, or I should say the top risk factors that cause the leading causes of death. When you talk about tobacco, you're talking about your lung problems. You're talking about your cancers. You're talking about all of the problems, all of this leads to like your vessels problems that can cause the other problems we talked about before, coronary problems. You're talking about all of the things, the top causes of death in Black people. If you start talking about suicide, if you start talking about homicide, these are the risk factors. When you talk about guns, more people commit suicide with guns. More people commit violence to each other, homicides with guns. So when you talk about music that promotes the reckless use of guns, it talks about the reckless being violent for people insulting them or people doing, that's what you're talking murder, you're talking suicide, you're talking death, the top causes of death in Black people.
Dr. McIntosh, you need to mute somebody. Stephanie Wright.
Okay. Stephanie Wright, please mute yourself. I'm going to ask you 2 more times. Okay. I was going to have to. All right. Driving under the influence. I mean, when I would go to high schools and I would say smoking on Indo, rolling down the street, sipping on, the kids would carry it from there, sipping on gin and juice, with my mind on my money and my money on my mind. They would do it immediately as soon as I did. I have to do new songs now, but new songs do the same thing. Not only do the top records promote the things that are killing us, but this is what I will tell you. that 8 to 10 songs will promote one or more of the top risk factors for the top 20 things killing us. And there will be one song which will promote all of them. Now, I separated alcohol from driving under the influence. I have that as two separate risk factors because it's different. Drinking alcohol causes you a whole lot of problems. Drinking alcohol can cause you all kinds of digestive problems. There's a certain Klebsiella pneumonia you'll never get if you're not an alcoholic, in general. It causes all kinds of problems. It causes accidents. One of the leading causes of death. When you're talking about young people, they die from accidents. That's maybe the number one cause. Driving while drinking, driving under the influence, I separated that out because that causes so many deaths. And how do you at all times have at least one record that advises you to drink and drug at the same time that you drive? How is that always true? And what I'm telling you is that's always true. I've done it. I've gone time and time again. When I give this presentation, I check the top 10 records to see drugs use and drugs. We're talking about your murders as well as the problems that come from the drugs. We're talking about congenital disorders. All of these are things that problems that are behavioral, but they cause physical death. They cause morbidity and mortality. When you talk about prostitution and promiscuity, you're talking about your AIDS, you're talking about all kinds of sexually transmitted diseases that can ultimately kill you, such as syphilis, this sort of thing. And you're talking about the terror that is done in the name of making people engage in this. That's why they find on that beach all of those murdered bodies or whatever it is. All of these are risk factors for the top things killing Black people. And as I said before, 8 or 9 of the songs will promote one or more of them, and one of the songs will promote all of them. And I've done this multiple times. The thing about it is you're supposed to have a control when you do an experiment like this. We can't call this a real experiment. This is just me looking at records and doing this. But I'll tell you what, I looked at the country and western at the same time, and it was the reverse picture. Only one of the songs promoted any of the risk factors that led to the top causes of death. So my point is, who's saying this? Is this Dr. McIntosh? No. This is the report of Media Violence Commission, International Society for Research on Aggression. They said that violent actions in the game over and over will result in more and more changes to the brain. Some basic experiments on whether media can affect behavior was done with little kids. They took them and showed them a picture with, they had let kids play with toys, right? Then they showed them a movie with the kids taking those toys and bopping each other in the head. What do you think happened when they turned the movie off? The kids bop each other in the head. Of course, this non-nutritious, we talk about feeding our body, what we feed our minds and what we feed our children's minds is having an effect on whether or not they live or die. It's having an effect on whether or not they are healthy or unhealthy. If media couldn't affect your behavior, why would people spend millions of dollars for a minute of time in the Super Bowl? Mercedes isn't doing that because they love sports or because they're charitable or because they want you to enjoy their commercials. They're doing it because watching that minute of commercial will result in many, many sales, and they will recoup their money. As a community, we have the worst diets, the least intact families, the most fathers incarcerated, and probably the most mothers incarcerated, the most unemployed, the worst housing. Then they want to test us and medicate us. It doesn't make any kind of sense. We have our brightest, greatest minds, our most courageous individuals languishing in prisons. This is by no means a comprehensive list. And they are dying in these prisons. They're dying they were dying before the COVID outbreak. And now the people don't want to release them even after their parole dates, even in the face of a pandemic. How do so many healthy people who are incarcerated end up with these cancers? How is my question. How could a disease that has a lifetime probability of occurring of 0.8% occur in two of the most well-known political prisoners after they spend time in the Florence Supermax, the only Supermax in the country, totally against the United States Constitution's injunction against cruel and unusual punishment. If you think I'm lying, let the warden tell you. He brags on it, essentially.
Supermax is life after death. It adds punishment to the crime.
Can you hear it? Can y'all hear it?
Not well.
Okay, then let's see if I have it. Let me see if I can make it a little better. Your computer sound. I'm going to rewind this if I can.
They've killed staff, they've killed guards, they've earned, if you will, the right to go to the Supermax.
He started out by saying that it includes the punishment, and that punishment is included in the incarceration.
Timothy McVeigh was there.
He's trying to paint these people as big murderers and killers.
Soon, this could be home to the marathon bomber. It's closed off to the rest of the world. Inside, the most dangerous inmates are sealed off.
You're designing it so the inmates can't see the sky. Intentionally. When it really hits you is that you're looking at the beauty of the Rocky Mountains in the backdrop. When you get inside, that's the last time you'll ever see it. As you're pulling up to this complex, there's shotguns in plain view, there's 9mm on this tear gas, they're going by
He's bragging.
gun towers, and that's before you even say hello to anyone. You'll be in triumphs, a belly chain, handcuffs.
Can't turn down my level, it's so loud.
Hundreds of cameras.
Can you hear it? Wave your hand if you can hear it. Even if poorly. Okay.
You're going to be in that box.
Everything's out of concrete. Can't even move your chair. Concrete bed.
Most likely for the rest of your life. His life, if he goes there, is pathetic no matter how you spin it. And it's, in my opinion, far much worse than death.
He ended it by saying that incarceration there is far much worse than death. In his opinion, he ought to know. And that's a federal prison. They put our captive African freedom fighters in there even when they don't commit federal crimes. Matulu wasn't convicted of federal crime, and neither was Jamil Abdullah El Amin. But it would wrench your heart to hear the account of Jamil Abdullah El Amin being taken to that prison as an elder, left in a car in which the temperature was 96 degrees for hours. He couldn't even stand. They couldn't even get him to the prison. They had to take him to the emergency room before they got to the prison. This is what's going on right now in prisons. I'm speaking specifically of political prisoners, but even people who in my opinion, have not committed crimes. They were at war with over our oppression. But even people who've committed crimes, the Constitution says they're not supposed to be treated like that. So we've been suffering from this stress from before COVID, and with anything, it's worse. If you don't do anything else, you don't get anything else from this presentation, I want you to take from it right now, what I'm trying to do is, I guess I have to start all over. Just not the whole presentation, just sharing the screen. We're waiting for Dr. I'm filibustering, but you know what I'm doing here, brothers and sisters? I am waiting for our keynote speaker. So what I'm going to do is present slide. Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Lewis is here.
Okay. All right, Dr. Lewis.
1 second, I'm just trying to help you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Lewis. I'm going to end this up in just a couple of minutes. When we try to assess the mental health of an individual, we do something called a mental status examination. I'm not going to go through the entire mental status examination, but I'm going to tell you that what Francis Welsing said about white supremacy, you can find it causes problems on every level of the mental status examination. I'm just taking a little piece of the examination called the sensorium. It can be remembered by the mnemonic or memory device, COMA, which starts the letter of each of those. So consciousness, orientation, memory, attention, and concentration. The stress of white supremacy has caused us not to know who we are. We think we are Negroes. We think we are Jamaicans. We think we are this. We think we are that. When Queen Mother Moore asked the question, if a dog has babies in an oven, what are they? Puppies or biscuits? If you realize that they're still puppies, then you should realize that we are still Africans. We talk about orientation. Who are we? What time is it? Where are we? Wade Noble says we suffer from those shattered consciousness and fractured identities. We talk about memory. This white supremacy causes problems in all kinds of memory. The three major problems are amnesis, hypernesis, and paramnesis. If I had the sound on and I said to you all, let's see, two all beef patties, special sauce, pickles, onions, lettuce, cheese on a what? Probably everybody here would say sesame seed bun because they've heard it so much. That means that that's something that's occupying valuable brain cells. That's something you don't need to know. We have hypernesis. Amnesis means when we forget. You know, 1,200 people died mysteriously in a country called Cameroons, right? It was on the front page of the news. Everybody remembered it. It didn't kill. It didn't leave any trace, kill the people. And you knew it, but you don't remember that now. You forgot. Causes a problem called paramnesis. What's paramnesis? Paramnesis is when you remember something that never even happened. You lose your wallet at work. You have everybody looking for it. They say, well, maybe you left it home. You say, no, I didn't leave it home because when I take it out of the drawer, I have a little ritual. I pat my pocket. And then when I get to the door, when I lock the door, I pat my pocket and make sure I had it this morning when I left. They search all over. They can't find the wallet. And when you get home, where's the wallet? Right there in your drawer. You remember taking it out, but it never happened. Many of us remember Carlton Heston and some people building the pyramids. That's something that never happened, but we remember it. Our health, our sensorium is damaged, not only on an individual level, but on a collective level. Stop the share again. That might be my sign, but I'm gonna just try to get to the last slide. I'm not far off, I don't believe. Let's see. Okay, I did acknowledge Dr. Lewis. I have that slide even when you're not here. Right here. How many of y'all like those Christmas movies? You like It's a Wonderful Life?
Your slide's not showing again.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad I got this view back. Those people who are on the screen, how many of you have seen It's a Wonderful Life, that movie? When you were unconscious, did you enjoy that movie? I know you wouldn't enjoy it now, but did you enjoy that movie before you were woke? Some of you are waving your hands. How did you feel about the sexual assault in that movie? Do you remember that? Anybody remember the sexual assault? No, I'm going to show you something. That's how memory is. That's how perception is. Can you see now? Yes. Watch this.
Festival's medical thing.
This is from the movie.
It's Dr. McIntosh.
Yes, I'm current side. Okay. You remember this movie. Wait for the sexual assault. Wait for it. These are high school boys at their graduation. Here he is chasing the black woman into the kitchen. Bam. There it was right there. You saw it, but you forgot. These are all the people to whom I'm indebted, who've made tremendous contributions in the field of psychiatry, even if that's not their primary discipline. I won't go through who all of them are.
Yeah. Have you working hard?
Okay, I have one of those slides that I want to show. This was in my presentation even before even when Dr. Lewis is not there. But these are people. You mentioned Dr. Charles Finch over here on the right. That's Joe Mack there. That's Ivan Vet Sermon. That's Dr. Lewis, who reviewed when I made a trip to Kemet. He came and taught us at Imhotep about some of the things that we would see. That's a stele you see with all of these instruments.
Your photo is missing.
The screen's not showing again. It was for a minute and you showed the picture and then it came back to us. So
Okay, then I'm going to take that as my sign that I should end a little early. The only other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give you that test I gave you before to see whether or not you're stressed. I'm going to show you two slides. I'm going to let Dr. Lewis see this one in case he hadn't seen it. Dr. Hunter showed this. We had the same slide because Dr. Hunter shared it with me, and I put it in my slideshow also. Let's just go back here. Let's just see. We're going to do screen share. We're going to pull it up. We're going to make a slideshow from the current slide. That was my sign. And here we go. Let's see if this
The FDA advisory committee that recommended the vaccine largely agreed it is safe and effective.
But one of the no votes came from a University of Michigan professor who was concerned about the vaccine's long-term impact. Paula Tutman has more.
21 experts from various scientific fields sat on that Pfizer vaccine advisory board yesterday to the FDA. 17 voted yes, 4 voted no. University of Michigan virologist and viral pathogen researcher Dr. Ovetta Fuller voted no.
What does that mean for long-term effects that cannot even be looked at right now because we just got this into people?
But Dr. Fuller wants people to understand why she voted no.
Because the public needs to understand so they can do what they need to do.
It's not a lack of confidence in the research. It's that she believes some specific questions about risks through her goggles as a virologist did not get answered.
It would be better to have more data, broader data, to be certain that at least what we can look at, we've done our due diligence. I am also concerned, if I may just say, that with the vaccine, in boosting immune response to the S protein, which is the attachment protein of the virus, that we are now setting up a highly specific immune response for a virus that's going to be continually circulating.
The plain English version is, as a researcher and an expert in how viruses behave, she still had questions on the table in terms of autoimmune immunity and hyperimmunity. To break it down even further, she just wanted a bit more research before creating a full path to wide vaccinations to the masses.
I am a great advocate of vaccines. I think vaccines are a major way that we can stop or prevent infections. And that saying that a stitch in time saves nine. So I think it's incumbent upon us to do our due diligence and to release this gradually, as opposed to going from a complete clinical study to now an emergency use that offers it to millions of people.
She believes just 2 more months of controlled studies would answer some of those specific questions. She is aware that her voice carries weight and will, as an expert, to many who may not trust the science, the scientists, the process, or the vaccine. Her intent, however, is not to discourage, but to better investigate. I think that was your long way of saying you're not going to be first in line to take the vaccine right now.
I would like to be,
but
I want some answers before that.
It's really worth your while to go to clickondetroit.com, where we have put the entire conversation with Dr. Fuller, because what she's saying can really help you understand the process and make your own personal decision about the vaccine.
Okay, do those two dolphins look the same now? Okay, because if they look the same, you have been cured of your stress. Last thing, support the Peace Health Center. You can donate to the Peace Health Center in 2 ways. You can send a cash app to $ Peace Health Center. You can mail a check to the Peace Health Center at 582 Halsey Street, Brooklyn, New York, 11233. This is an important African institution. Don't let it close because of not supporting it. It doesn't accept government funds, and it gets no government funds. And if it's going to be supported, it has to be through us. I want you to paste in the chat. If you don't know where your chat is, down at the bottom of the screen, there's a box that says chat. You open it up. You can let me know, or you can let everybody know. It doesn't make any difference. You can be private if you want to, but put your email address in there and put your pledge to the Peace Health Center. In the chat, I'll paste again exactly how you can do it, the Cash App or the mailing. And don't think you have to give a large amount. If you want to give a large amount, do. But Ujamaa is the 4th principle of Kwanzaa. That's cooperative economics. That means that if we've had 90 people on this call at certain points, I don't know how many in here now, but 90 people giving $10 is $900. Will $900 be of a help, Sister Shadidi? Let me see you by waving your hand. She says she's waving 2 hands. So whatever you have 10, if you have 20, if you have 1, if you have 2, if you have 100 or 1,000, please donate to the Peace Health Center. Now, I'm going to have Dr. Lewis introduce himself. You know him as, I think he really almost needs no introduction, because he is a community healer. We know him as helping our elders like Dr. Ben and everyone that got sick. The first person, Sister Lori, when they get sick, the first person we think of is going to Dr. Lewis, because we know Dr. Lewis is not on the payroll of Big Pharma. He doesn't get money for giving us things that are injurious to our health. And, you know, we known him in the struggle for a long time. So please welcome to the microphone, Dr. Arthur Lewis. Thank you, Dr. Lewis. You got it.
McIntosh. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Something.
Say something.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay. Let's see if we can go through this. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
So I can begin?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My name is Dr. Arthur Lewis. Again, as I said, I'd like to extend my appreciation for being given the opportunity to speak with you. What I have decided to do for this presentation is I put together a number of documents. So what I will be doing is reading from these documents, covering certain areas as it relates to the topic that we're dealing with here. I reviewed the documents that I put together, and it'll take me about 15 minutes in which to deliver it. So I will begin. I will be reading primarily, without commenting. I am an African American. I am 77 years of age and in good health. I am married to an African woman from North Carolina for 52 years. We have 5 children, 7 grandchildren. I've been a medical doctor for 47 years, trained in general surgery, ophthalmology, emergency medicine, and herbalism. I've traveled to a number of countries in North Africa, West Africa, and also as part of a medical team in the Caribbean, and also a medical team in the South Pacific. And I want to say that I am speaking as a medical doctor, not as a specialist in vaccines or epidemiology. We go on. 2011, World Trade Center complex in New York City was bombed. 2011, Patriot Act was introduced, and the Patriot Act in the United States replaced the Constitution. 2020, COVID-19 pandemic, mayor, governor, presidents of the United States declared a health emergency. When that took place, the civil law reverted now to a martial law, which we are under at this particular
I'm going to put a sweatshirt on. I'll be right back. Oh,
Why
come on, you eating already? How's it look?
Wear mask,
Good. Save it. I'll be right back.
6-foot distancing, no public gatherings, school shutdowns, transportation shutdowns, economic shutdowns, mass unemployment, mandatory lockdown, people in curfews, quarantine detention, and restriction of movement, local, state, and international. Testing, and now an attempt at mandatory vaccine. I'm going to read a small article from the internet that I picked up. And it says, something extremely bogus is going on. Elon Musk tests both positive and negative for coronavirus. In November, Elon Musk, founder, CFO, and chief engineer designer of SpaceX, speaks. Elon Musk, also known as the creator of the Tesla electric car, says he took 4 tests for coronavirus after having cold-like symptoms. The result provided was more confusion than clarity. Something, quote, something extremely bogus is going on. I was tested for COVID virus 4 times today. 2 tests came back negative and 2 tests came back positive. Same machine, same test, same nurse. Musk tweeted to his nearly 40 million followers. Experts have cautioned that such rapid tests are less reliable than the longer turnaround PCR tests. When asked by followers about his condition in the mass, he said he just had a few symptoms of cold at this particular point. What I want to also touch on briefly was the fact that there is according to the CDC in the Northern Hemisphere in the United States of America, there is a flu season. This flu season runs from October 1, 2019 to April 4th, 2020. The United States was in the flu season for those periods of time before the coronavirus was announced that it was here. And I'm going to give you the numbers that I took out off the CDC site as it relates to the flu symptoms or flu status in the United States from October 19, 2019 to April 4th. And this is what the CDC said, reported on their website that you can go on, stated that these are statistics and the estimates they put out before there was a coronavirus lockdown in March. It says here, flu illnesses, 30 to 56 million. Flu medical visits, 18 million to 26 million. Flu hospitalization, 410,000 to 740,000. The number of flu deaths before Corona hit it was here between the CDC, 24,000 and 62,000 from the CDC record. The question is, was there any testing for the flu? Any of the flu? Were there any vaccines proposed for the flu at this particular time? Also, the number of individuals tested, were there specific tests for the flu? I'm going to go on to just touch base very quickly with vaccines. What I would like everyone to do is, if any particular vaccine they're interested in, you go online, you go on the official sites, and you see what these vaccines are made of. So I'm just going to give you one example that I took out. It was called an adenovirus vaccine, but it was an oral application. And this is what's in it from the official vaccine constituent files. Acetone, alcohol, lactate, castor oil, dextrose, fructose, mannose, FDC yellow dye, aluminum lake dye, fetal bovine serum, that's blood from the cow, and human bovine serum. That's what some of the constituents in this virus. Other vaccines contain formaldehyde, aluminum, and mercury. So if you're concerned about what vaccine to take, you go and look it up and you begin to see what they put into these vaccines. As far as the COVID vaccine, I'm taking information that is put out to the public. It is produced by private corporations. It's a new experimental vaccine that's being rushed into production. It's an RNA vaccine, which means it can alter your genetics in each of your cells. And it's approved by the US government. There were many trial bypasses. There are no long-term studies. You have to concern with informed consent. The other thing I'm going to do here is just to bring to our attention where these viruses come from. When the people say you have this coronavirus, you have this flu virus. And I'm going to use two studies here. One is produced in February 2018 by scientists around the globe. And it is titled, and you can look it up, Viruses Falling from the Sky in Their Billions Every Day. Billions of viruses fall from the sky every day, according to the new research, which could explain why genetically identical viruses are often found in very different environments around the world. The second thing I want to bring to the attention of our audience is that another article, biggest Sahara dust storm in 50 years hits the US. Because of the spin of the earth, winds bring from the Sahara dust. And this dust contains particles. It contains particles that fertilize the soil in Central and South America and the southern part of the United States. They also contain billions of viruses. So you have two sources of viruses that we inhale every day. From the internet also, see actual letters where Europeans plotted to intentionally give smallpox to Indian Native American in order to exterminate them. Extermination, evidence of biological warfare against the Native American. United States Biological Weapons Program revealed the long suppressed official report on the US biowarfare in North Korea. The Army tested germ warfare on the New York City subway by smashing light bulbs full of bacteria. research into deadly viruses and biological weapons at the U.S. Army lab. Fort Detrick researchers banned from working with anthrax and Ebola, smallpox, until procedures are improved. So the other question we have to ask, is this one of those countries' biowarfare programs that got out of hand? I'm going to touch on the second of the last page I want to present to you, because the virus has an economic component to it. And it's an article that was put out. A new study from the PwC estimates that 38% of US jobs could be lost to automation in the next 15 years. This article came out on March 25th, 2017. And it says the US will be hit worse by job automation than major other economies. I'm going to also quote from the chairman of the Federal Reserve of the United States, and it says, the head of the Federal Reserve on Tuesday, November 17, 2020, addressed some bankers. And this is what is put out on that particular meeting. He's quoting Federal Reserve Chairman, United States. "We are never going back to the old economy," the Fed chairman says. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell doubled down on his remark that the economy as we know it is over during a virtual appearance Tuesday at the Bay Area Council Business Hall of the Fame Award ceremony. "We're not going back to the same economy. We're going back to a different economy," Powell said, echoing comments he made at the European Central Bank Forum on the central banking last week. The pandemic has accelerated ongoing trends, including the increasing use of technology, automation, and teleworks, Powell said last Thursday. And while these changes will be beneficial for some, they will hurt certain people in the short run. On Tuesday, Powell also reiterated that people in the lower income job hadn't recovered as much as others, and that workers in the service industry might need more help. Now, he's alluding to the 47 million individuals who had jobs in March who no longer have jobs as of this date. I'm going to end by dealing with just a little touch of public health, because we are a population in this particular case in the United States, and there's a population around the world. So they have a part of medicine or science they call public health. And I'm giving you one of the definitions. One, it says the art and science of protecting, maintaining, and improving the health of a people in a community. To monitor, to diagnose, to treat, to mobilize, to educate the community. So let's look at a snapshot of the people of the United States of America and how the government and private corporations are protecting our health generally and specifically from viruses. We're going to look at three aspects of public health. Wherever you go in the world, if you want to judge the health of the people generally, you look at three major things: the air, the water, and the food. That's environmental health. In the United States, the air is massively polluted. The water is massively polluted in most of the drinking reservoirs in the cities of the United States, particularly with pharmaceutical drugs. Food in the United States, for most of the part, is toxic, poison with pesticides. Now let's look at the medical health system that is supposed to keep us healthy. You have three components that make up the federal budget in the United States. One is military, where it takes a third. One is the medical establishment, takes a third, and then the other is whatever they decide to spend on it. And these are the death rate for Americans in the United States. The number one condition that most Americans will die, other than normal death, will be cardiovascular disease. The second most common killer of American people in the United States, approximately 700,000 a year, is the medical industry. You can get a book called Death by Medicine. It is the medical physicians, it is the pharmaceutical companies, and the insurance. That's the medical monopoly that takes care of ourselves. 700,000 dead as a result of that. And the third thing that the average American in this country will die of is cancer. So just give a little snapshot of how well the private sector and the government is doing to take care of our health. To wind down, general health in the United States may be basically poor. In terms of immune system, we'll deal with the diet. What is called a disease healthcare system, meat-based diet, meat, milk, processed foods, and medicines. They basically do not help in any manner to keep an immune system strong or healthy. But in terms of the nutrition, you would have to go to a plant-based diet. Vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds, and herbs. Just what has been keeping you alive before there was these viruses, and before there was a CDC, and before there were vaccines. And to end on what's your immune system, stress is very important to keep your immune system strong. But consider the stress that the average American undergoes in this particular society in terms of economics, racism, nutrition. We're in a lockdown, and exercise is critical for your health. So these are some of the considerations that I wanted to bring to you so that you can consider on whatever level you want to, whether you want these vaccines or whether the private corporations in working with the government together, which under some definitions called fascism, whether you want to take the vaccine. Do you trust it? And what I'm going to do is just end with a snapshot of how the United States of America functions in the country and how it affects all of us. And I'm going to cite literature that's in the public domain. There is nothing here that I am the originator of. I'm just reporting to you. It says here, a book called Heroin, Heroin, written by Alfred W. McCoy, editor, revised editor. CIA complicity in the global drug trade. Awash in cash, drug cartels rely on big banks to launder profits. Guardian, drug money saves banks in the global crisis, claim the US. London is now the global money laundering center of drug trade, said the crime experts. Death rate rising for middle-aged white Americans, study find. A deadly crisis mapping the spread of American drug overdose and epidemic. Students locked down with loans. The Federal Reserve in 2013 said that 50% of all 25 to 35-year-old individuals were at home with their parents or grandparents. I'm giving you an idea to show you how the economy has been run, but now there's a concern for your health. Pentagon, 2017, official report, 71% of all young people in the United States between age 17 and 24 are not eligible for military service. Why? Criminality, health, obesity, poor health, and no high school diploma. As we end, there's a book called The Color of Law, a forgotten history of how the US government segregated America. Indigenous people in concentration camps, African people in urban cities, and the masses of poor white and white in your Appalachians and in your rusted cities of the United States. I thank you for consideration and giving me the time to speak with you. Questions and answers or comments? I'm finished with my presentation officially.
Yes, Dr. Lewis, thank you so much. You gave us a lot to think about. There's a And does anybody have a question? If you have a question, post it into the chat.
Congress and the judiciary will get early access to COVID vaccines. Now, the authority for this.
People are getting sloppy with the muting again. Okay, does anybody have a question they want to put into the chat? What about when they try to apply force to make people get vaccinated, Dr. Lewis? What do you think? What do you think should occur?
The best way I can answer the question is what is actually happening in this country under the Patriot Act and other laws. When they declare, the government, federal, state, or city declares a health emergency, then the civil laws, many of the civil laws are superseded by martial laws. And part of that is the government has certain rights in the Patriot Act to force immunization and other types of activities on you, by quarantining you, not letting you move around, by saying if you don't get the vaccine, you may lose your job or you can't move around. That's why they had a Nuremberg set of codes of law. So the question that I'm just bringing up by bringing the facts is the government of the United States and the people who represent them working with the corporations? Are they working in the best interest for the health of the people of the United States, given the history of the country? They have the right to do it because they have the law with coercion, the martial law gives it to them, and they're exercising it.
Wow.
No one else has any questions? Okay, but we'd like you to type it. Type it.
It's in the chat.
Okay, I missed it. Let's see. My understanding is that currently, since the vaccine is an EUA drug, it cannot be forced upon you. However, once the vaccine gets full approval, it may be mandated. That's from Dr. Michelle J. Hudson to everyone.
If this is true, then you're getting your proof.
Okay. Anyone else?
I would just like to make a quick statement. There was a study by 2 university staffs, and they studied the laws that were passed in the United States from about 1980s to the early 1950. And they said that the vast majority of laws passed in the United States, federal, state, and local, was passed for the large and small corporation at the expense of the masses of people. So what I'm trying to do is bring some consideration here that there is an aspect of this, not just medical, not just pandemic, not just vaccines, it's control. And a national emergency is a legitimate way of doing it.
There's a question from, sorry, lost it for a second. Okay. Does any of our presenters have information about oregano oil and thyme oil? Both are reported to bolster the immune system. That's from, I think, Dr. William Jones.
And I'll reply to it as best I can. Most plants produce all types of chemicals to protect itself. And those chemicals that are in plants to protect themselves from viruses, from bacteria and everything else, you call them antioxidants. So most of your fruits will contain nutrients that will boost your immune system. Most of the vegetables that you eat have nutrients that boost your immune system. So when you're talking about boosting the immune system, basically you're talking about the ability to protect itself from bacteria, viruses, all kind of things. And it isn't just one particular fruit. So you take something like elderberry, it's very powerful antioxidant, but all the berries, any kind of fruit, especially with color, the colored part of fruits are chlorophylls and powerful antioxidants. So the whole question is, in terms, there are thousands and thousands of fruits and herbs, but you let people know what is going to boost your immune system. The best overall, plant-based diet, organic. Vegetables contain the minerals and nutrients and vitamins that the body needs. Your immune system is not one particular thing. It's your intake of fresh water, not being poisoned by your food, not being poisoned by your ear. That's where health starts as far as I'm concerned. And the herbs, the elderberries and all of that, it's excellent. But those are not the primary source of your immune system. The primary sources is to have good mental state, lack of rest, good mental state to cut down the stress, adequate rest, a good plant-based diet, exercise, and knowledge of what's bothering. That's the foundation that keeps you alive. The herbs, antioxidants that come out of fruits and vegetables primarily augment that. But see how long you're going to last an immune system without oxygen? About 12 minutes? See how long you're going to last without water? How long do you think you're going to last without good food? So yes, you do have these things that are critically important. We know all fruits, especially ones of color, have chlorophyll and powerful antioxidant. You check the literature. There's at least 35, they say at least 35,000 known antioxidants that help the body boost the immune system. And you find them in all of the colored vegetables. It's still back to those fundamentals: stress, sleep, plant-based diet, exercise, and knowledge of what's around you to protect yourself.
Could I ask if Dr. Neema Hooker is still here? Because someone had a question about messenger RNA. That was Brother Askuli had a question about messenger RNA. Dr. Hooker went into that to some degree. Her basic position was that the messenger RNA could not enter the nucleus of the cell, which is where the DNA was, and that she felt some level of protection as a result of that it could not enter the nucleus of the cell. Personally, you know, if I had a fox in a chicken coop, and you told me, well, the fox can't get in the chicken coop because there's a fence around the chicken, I still wouldn't feel that safe about it. I don't want anybody messing with my RNA or my DNA.
Dr. Mack, the question wasn't from me. I was actually pointing out that there are questions in the chat. So Gus asked, does messenger RNA virus actually change your cells, or does it?
That's probably when Neema Hooker answered him. She answered him. And she told why she didn't think it could. There's a couple of other questions. Okay. You asked a question about, is there a particular website we could use to look up what is in vaccinations? And then there was also a question about, can you tell us something about the manufacturers of these vaccines and any settlements that have been made? And Berta Olyenka asked for more detailed information on the dangers of the vaccine and messenger RNA. Oh, she gave a link. I'm sorry. Anybody who wants it, Berta Olyenka left a link to the detailed info on the dangers of vaccine and messenger RNA, that they should go to that link. So you can, all you have to do is just take it and cut and paste this chat on a Word file, and you'll have it forever. You can look and find those questions and answers that are there. There's also a question about financial links. Do you know about any financial links, I think, between Fauci and Gates?
General question?
Say that again?
Is it a general question?
It's a question, yeah, general question.
you have to go and begin to do the homework and dig into what they say, what their foundation. You'll get the information. The information is there. But now that's why we're presenting these different topics for people to say, okay, I didn't consider that. I didn't consider, let me start digging in and let me see exactly what it is. I don't have enough information on either of them because I haven't done any detailed homework on them, but it's there. It's there.
I want to address a mental health issue, Dr. Lewis, which is that, you know, people sometimes call people conspiracy theorists and paranoia and this sort of thing for some of the things they have. Some of the wilder claims that I see, they are disturbing. You know, people who told me they thought it was a hoax. I knew it wasn't a hoax because my wife, you know, works in the hospital, and she was telling me about the vans of bodies that were there and the number of new nurses that they had to hire. I mean, it was in the hundreds. I think it was 500 at that hospital, and the salaries they were paying these temporary people to come in and work. Clearly, you know, something was really happening. Now, I'm not saying, you know, that it was the way they presented it, but what I will say is that people are dying, people were dying, people were sick, and they were sick in large numbers, and this seemed to be happening around the country.
That's true.
And that they were spending tremendous amount of money to treat these people. But I want to address the issue of when people talk about paranoia. There's a saying, you know, it's not paranoia if they're really after you. Some of the things I have to say is so old, I just would assume that everybody knows it. You know, there was, I like, Dr. Lewis, I've noticed how skillfully you're saying things, and I'd like to be equally as skillful. I probably wouldn't be, when I say in terms of being cautious, because there are consequences to telling people the truth. A lot of people talk to me about making jokes all the time, but, you know, a guy said one time, he said, if you're going to tell people the truth, you better make them laugh, otherwise they'll kill you. So with respect to the basis of paranoia, there was a sister, I believe her name was Burnett Nelson. She wrote a long piece, and one of the chapters was the basis of paranoia. And she went through essentially, this is before Harriet Washington, she went through the history of the involuntary contributions African people have made to medicine, being experimented on, having hot boiling water poured on them to cure typhoid fever, being buried up to their necks, you know, at crazy temperatures and things like that. We all know about J. Marion Sims and the operations he did on women that he, quote, owned, that he legally owned, operations on their private parts without the aid of anesthesia, and then how maybe with things like opioids or whatever was around at that particular time, some of these women, you know, became addicted to things. We know this history, but a lot of times I would like to say, I had slides in which I would show you the front page of the London Times, May 11th, 1987. The headline on that basically is about the linkage between the smallpox vaccination period, smallpox vaccination program in Africa, and the countries in which the virus, the AIDS virus, was most common. I didn't say that. That's the London Times. I remember reading another headline or another article, and I think it was in about, I can't remember the year that Lumumba, it wasn't the year that Lumumba was killed, but it was years later. It was probably around 1977. An article in the New York Times said that the CIA had sent its top scientists there to the Congo to give Lumumba a detectionless poison. But when they got there, he had already been murdered by the forces that were there. So, I mean, there was a lot of admissions there that they murder heads of state, that they have detectionless poison, and that, you know, that they will dispatch people to use it. I mean, this is not me saying it. This is the New York Times saying it. There was a paper called Who Murdered Africa? I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Lewis, by Mr. Douglas, Dr. Douglas.
Okay, good enough.
And he basically talked about the distribution of AIDS again, and how the story that was being told just couldn't be true, that the AIDS virus wasn't a jet pilot. It couldn't just hop back and forth from place to place among these different populations. There was another thing called the Strecker Memorandum, which talked about which talked about the connection between a hepatitis B vaccination program and the distribution of AIDS in the United States. When they had the Melanin Conference, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing finished talking. When she finished talking, she saw a guy out in the audience that she said, you know, you ought to let him come up and say something. Well, the people looked at him. They didn't know who he was. I don't think they liked the way he looked. They started breaking down the equipment, the video equipment. Am I going on too long, or is this of any relevance to you? Okay, so they started breaking down the video equipment. This dude got up and he explained that the first time he became suspicious about the vaccination programs, he says that the General Assembly of the UN had asked the question, why was it that every time they discovered a new virus, it was in the area where there had been a World Health Organization program, a US AIDS program or something, and then how come their scientists that were Western trained at the best universities, that they weren't discovering these viruses? There's always somebody from the United States. I'm going to have to mute myself because my wife has to do something on another computer there. So at any rate, what I'm saying is there's a great basis for the suspicion. That particular brother, he had been the head of the swine flu vaccination program in DC, and that he had, one of the things that alerted him was that brothers didn't want to take the vaccine. So he said he asked himself the question, why were the batches pre-designated as to where they were supposed to go? And he said, so I got up, he said he got a batch that was for all white Arlington mixed up with the batch for inner city DC. When he said that the audience broke into applause, you should have seen the video guys scrambling try to get that. I had the tapes from the first Melanin Conference, but that part isn't taped there. But this brother was, you know, so what my point is that there's a long history of experimentation on us. There's a long history of questions being raised about these viruses and these vaccines and these sorts of things. So there's a basis for the paranoia. People aren't crazy. You know, I'm just telling you as a psychiatrist, they're not crazy. You should ask questions. You shouldn't just go and let people inject something in your body without properly investigating it. When, you know, people in certain positions, they can only give you like one hint. I had a friend, he said he had a dog, and like they were out somewhere and a danger came up, like a bear or something like that. He said that dog would look back at him one time, he said, which meant we better run. He said, and if you didn't run, you would be messed up. You had to know when that dog looked back at you that one time that meant to run. And when the black member of the FDA says she still got questions about the vaccine, and you just saw that on the tape that Keith played and that I played, you know, that's all people in that kind of position can do, is give you a little wink and say, hey, yo, you know what I mean? For me, that was a signal. And she was very cautious. Would you want to take? She said, I would want to be, but, you know, I have questions. Now, if she got questions, how could we, who are nowhere near that circle, nowhere near those rooms, nowhere near that? She's a virologist. If she has questions, how could we not have at least have questions? That's all I had to say. The basis of paranoia. It's not paranoia if people are really out to hurt you. And this country has shown us over and over that they're really trying to hurt us.
Dr. Mack.
Go on.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Mack, if I could add, there was forgot who it was. They said if you're a black person in America, you're not paranoid, something is wrong with you. Aside from those things that you just said, we also have to remember in recent years, I forgot whether the gentleman was MI6 or CIA. He said that he's the one that killed Bob Marley. Bob Marley used to play soccer. He gave Bob Marley a pair of tennis shoes which he said had a needle on it, which administered a poison that affected the symptoms of what they said he had, whatever they said he died of. There's also a video from a gentleman that was part of an elite unit in Southern Africa, and I think it was Rhodesia and South Africa. And the gentleman in the video, he lays out how as part of that unit, it was a mercenary unit, but what they were doing, they were working with the project. And what he said is, if you want to attack people, what you do is you set up a so-called philanthropic vaccination operation. And so how many philanthropic vaccination operations have we had in Africa? Doctors Without Borders has been attached to some of these things. I think it's in Uganda, or it's one of the countries on the east coast of Africa. They kicked
Kenya.
The doctors out because the doctors were coming in with a so-called tetanus vaccination. Now, I'm 52 years old. The only time that you doctors could correct me, but I was under the assumption that you don't give a tetanus vaccination unless there's a cause for it, meaning the person cuts themselves on a rusty nail or something like that. But they were in East Africa given a pre-tetanus vaccination. And the doctors were saying that there was a correlation, that the Kenyan doctors was finding a correlation between the women who received, and they were only giving it to women that were childbearing age. And so they were finding that there was a correlation between the tetanus, who received the tetanus vaccination, and women that were becoming sterile.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you, Brother Ascoli. You speaking to the point exactly. Everything you're saying is just saying that we have a valid basis for being suspicious and using caution. However, our time is up right now, and we're going to have to end the meeting. I want to thank each of my speakers. Dr. Lewis, did you have something else you wanted to say in the end?
No, I just, what you said was very important. I'll just take 30 seconds about us putting enough information out for us to have a suspicion. I would just say that, when I was in the South Pacific, we were told that the French doctors and European doctors would come by to vaccinate the children. And the children this is 70s and 80s when I was there, children would always get sick. And then they will not allow the vaccination to go on from there. And the only thing I can say to you at this point, on a global scale, you have what they call the F-I-V-E, 5 I's. E-Y, the I's you see with. The 5 I's are England, US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Each of them are settler states. Each went in, took the land, exterminated the people. And when I was in one of the small South Pacific islands, they said they had millions of the people. And when Europeans came in, they did to the Africans in the South Pacific, they did to them what they did to us from the continent. They call it blackbirding, when they raid the islands and then take them to the plantations in Australia. So you have enough information to connect these people. And I just want to say one last thing about the connection. You have what they call the World Economic Forum. You heard of it. You go online, you look it up, and you find out that basically it started out as a European organization for European businessmen. Then they expanded. World Economic Forum is a private NGO of white American male elites of Western Europe and United States, the same ones who benefited from the African continental free trade zone. And now that Asia is beginning to come up, Africa is beginning to come up, and the other thing, they want to hold it on as long as they can. The only thing I can say to those who are trying to exterminate us, they're going to have a hard job, because they say that 17% of the population of the world lives in Africa. And if you add up the Africans who don't live, we're 20% of the world's population by all people statistics. And the way the continent is growing, the people are going to, those people who are your enemies, the 5 Eyes and the European, they're going to do everything they can to slow up the development of Asia and Africa and the rest of it. So it all is tied in any way you want to look at it.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Lewis, Dr. Gallman, Dr. Shadidi, everybody. Thank you, Brother Dalil, everybody that attended. We have to end now because I'm in another room with another computer with another program that has to go on, and I have to stop. Thank you so much. Peace and blessings.
Thank you.